else have any comments on the minutes?
I'll move approval with that correction.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, let's move on to item 4, public comment for items that are not on tonight's agenda. So if anybody from the public would like to speak for 3 minutes about any topic that's not covered on tonight's agenda, please come up to the podium now.
Hello, my name is Rhoda Bennett, and I live at 950 Cornell, Albany. And I'd just like to say that I'm tickled pink that Caltrans or whoever has removed all the garbage out from underneath the freeway. It looks fantastic. Before it was a dump, and it was horrible. And I'm just really happy. It looks like it's supposed to be. So, if you take a look now, there's no weeds there.
Thank you.
Two things. I'll hit the somber one first. September is Rail Safety Month in California. And as you probably remember, we've had a couple of deaths in or near Albany on the railroad tracks within recent memory, the last 3 years or so. There was a death this last weekend in Richmond. I believe there was a teenager who was killed on the tracks. These things happen all the time. We don't have a grade level crossing in Albany, but we still seem to have people dying on the railroad tracks. There's a break in the fence that gets broken pretty consistently, and it's hard for the maintenance department to keep up with it. If you're interested, the Union Pacific Railroad that maintains the line through Albany has said if they get enough complaints, they will upgrade the fence. So I'm interested in testing them on that commitment, and I would encourage everyone to call the Union Pacific Railroad Police Hotline. And I've walked up here tonight without that. I'll have that for you later. But the more complaints we get in when the fence is broken or breached in some way, the more likely it is that they'll upgrade the fence. Happy Rail Safety Month. On a brighter note, it's Albany Local Week. Pardon my casual attire. I was just at the block party by Solano Cellars. Don't everybody run out, they're short on pizza. But they've got Little Star Pizza and wine, and there are several other events. Tomorrow night is the food trucks at the Albany Community Center, and the Albany Triathlon is on Sunday. And I would be remiss, Amy Smolens is out working in Richmond, Virginia, but were she here, she would remind you that there are 29 bike racks in Albany in front of local businesses who helped sponsor, along with the city and the strollers and rollers, their installation. And you can get 100 points in the Albany Local Week competition for checking in at a business with a bike rack. So I encourage you all to do that. Thank you.
One comment on Ken's public comment. Can the commission send a letter to Union Pacific, and was that something that we'd be interested in doing? And I don't know if we have to take that up as an item in the future.
Robert, flip the switch underneath. Okay, any other comment from public or commission about items not on tonight's agenda? Okay, let's move on to number 5. Do we have a police report tonight?
I'm not a police officer, but I have the police report.
Okay, 5A, police report.
And incidentally, I've started a conversation with Chief McQuiston and Lieutenant Geisberger about how to maybe improve our reporting to you, their reporting to you, and kind of use some of the other data. We didn't have it on this agenda, but we do want to show you some of the information we can get from CHD databases on traffic accidents that I think would be very, very interesting to the commission, and the combination of the existing data you get plus maybe some of that the information from the CHB database will help you understand better where accidents are happening in Albany, and why, and what times of day, and the characteristics of the drivers and so forth. It's really interesting stuff. And if we ever get an agenda where we've got a little bit of time to play around with some of the fields that you can pull up, we'll add that to the agenda. For the month of August, however, I have the standard statistics that the police department usually reports on. There were a total of 20 accidents. 18 of the 20 were non-injury. 7 of them were hit and runs. 1 of them involved a bicycle. And there were no accidents near schools and no accidents involving pedestrians. In terms of moving citations, they issued 93 moving citations and made 8 DUI arrests. And they didn't have any other notable information to report for this month.
Okay. Any questions?
I would just note that there was an injury accident reported in the Journal. I believe it occurred on the 24th of August and involved a pedestrian at about 9:40 in the evening on the Garfield crossing of San Pablo. And apparently the driver did not see the pedestrian, and the pedestrian was injured enough to go to the hospital, but there's no other information available.
When?
I believe it was the 24th. I have the article at home. I can get that to you later.
I'm sorry, we don't have that information in this database, but we'll find out why.
I did want to report on one thing. I checked with the police department about regulations relative to cyclists stopping at stop signs and whether or not there's any requirement to put your foot down. And there's none. Nothing in the vehicle code requires that, and we do not enforce whether or not somebody puts their foot down. All it says is you have to come to a complete stop. So we can hopefully put to rest any concerns that someone might have that if they can stop and stay balanced without putting their feet down, that there's any problem with that.
Check with the Berkeley Police Department? No.
No, the Albany Police
The Albany
Chief.
Police Department.
Chief McQuiston confirmed that for me. So I just thought that'd be useful to share in the context of this item.
Any other questions or comments related to the police report? Go ahead, come on up to the podium, please.
I'm not sure about the procedure. I'm Christine Kundakji, and I live at 833 Santa Fe Avenue. And I asked the police and the newspaper why the Albany police report is not in the Journal very often anymore. Is there any way that you guys could make them put it in? That's all.
I think I know the explanation of why. Right now, the city doesn't have a community engagement specialist working for us. Karina Tyndall, who many of you knew for a lot of her different activities in the community, is no longer with the city. So they're shorthanded, both with the number of officers that they would normally like to have, as well as staff to support that kind of information. I know they appreciate that it's useful information to the community. They're trying to figure out a way to get that out to you.
Okay, anything else related to the police report? All right, let's move on to item 6A, blue curb request at 907 Buchanan.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the commission, members of the public. The city has received a request to install an accessible parking space in front of 907 Buchanan, and the person who presented the request has a disabled placard from the DMV. I included the notification that was sent to the blog with a picture of the location. The parking occupancy is about 60% on that block. That was taken at about 2 p.m. on a weekday. So the area is, there's no grade, it's flat, and the house has a driveway. The only thing, and I asked the property owner why didn't he use his driveway, and he said that basically it's very narrow, and he could not open the door. It was very difficult, particularly when he's bringing groceries from the, from the store or bags. So it is more convenient for him to actually go straight in front of the house. There are a couple of stairs, but I'm sure if there's another entry to the house on the back. Any questions?
Questions from the commission? Anybody from the public like to speak on this item?
The way he's not here because he didn't have a ride and he cannot drive.
Okay. Okay, discussion? Anybody have any concerns about this? Or seems like the usage of the curb parking is not that high, so there's
About 60%.
not a huge amount of competition for these spaces.
Not that I
so
know.
Removing one from general circulation wouldn't be a hardship for anybody else.
Right.
Okay. Anybody like to make a motion?
I move to approve request to install a disabled parking space at 907 Buchanan.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Well, if we can move along at this speed, we'll be out of here by 7:30. Let's do item 6B, parking management study.
Mr. Chair, if we may switch things around, we're waiting for one of our two consultants is here, but we're waiting for a second one, so if we could maybe push item
to
B
item-
back a little bit, and we can back to it when.
Okay. So let's do item 6C, Golden Gate Transit Express Bus Service Plan.
It's, yeah. So, right, we have a study report that was posted online today about the Golden Gate Transit request to expand their service across the Golden Gate, across the San Rafael Bridge to serve Alameda County. I invited David Davenport from Golden Gate Transit, and he's here to make a presentation. So you can go there. Do you bring anything too?
I didn't bring the visual.
I do have mine. It's on the agenda.
Good evening, everyone. My name is David Davenport, and I'm a planner for the Golden Gate Bridge Highway and Transportation District. And I'm here hopefully to bring you good news, which is we're coming to town to provide you with a new transit service across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. And our specific request tonight is to have one of the red curbs at the bus stop at Buchanan and Jackson, the westbound near side stop, expanded so that it's actually long enough to accommodate a full-size bus. Right now, the red curb is about 30 feet long. Our transit buses are 40 to 45 feet long. And so we're asking for an extension of the rest of the curb face between the intersection and the driveway to be included as the bus stop zone, which would bring it to a standard length for us to load and unload passengers at that location. The staff report that Alita prepared in consultation with me explains a lot of the genesis for the service and what it would look like. I don't know if you want me to go over it for your sake or not, but okay. So the Golden Gate Bridge District currently operates all of the bus service across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. We started operations in March of 1993. Prior to that, there was no public transit service across the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge. We currently operate two routes between El Cerrito and San Rafael. One runs weekdays only, the other one runs 7 days a week. And as part of our most recent short-range transit plan, which we actually finalized in February, we identified a need to restructure the service so that it better served the community. So the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, who formally accepts the SRTPs from transit operators, liked what they read, and they actually agreed to not only accept our desire to improve the service, but they also gave us additional regional measure coupons, which are a portion of the bridge toll that everyone pays when you cross a bridge. So with the expansion in funding, that actually allowed us to not only improve the bus service to El Cerrito, but to actually create a new bus route. And that bus route we targeted to the second most common kind of work trip pair, which is from northern Alameda County to central Marin County. And so the new route, which we would like to start service on in mid-December, runs from Emeryville and kind of West Berkeley, and then touches through Albany before getting on the freeway up at Buchanan Street and 580 over by Golden Gate Fields. And then from there, the route runs nonstop into Marin County and then makes local stops comparable to our existing El Cerrito service into central San Rafael, and then actually goes through the transit center and then terminates in the industrial area in central San Rafael, which is actually where we're headquartered. And so the service would be weekdays only, morning westbound service every half hour, afternoon eastbound service every half an hour. And that's the basic gist of it.
Questions from the commission?
So the stops that are proposed, especially the westbound stop, is off of San Pablo. And
Correct.
I know you're stopping in Emeryville. How frequently are you stopping along San Pablo?
Our service will be like our other existing service in the East Bay. It's a limited stop service. So our stops are very similar to what the AC Transit Rapid route is. We actually do have one extra stop that they don't, but that's to provide transit connections to routes that cross San Pablo. So there's I think there's about 9 stops total on the East Bay side of the route. So 2 in Emeryville, 5 in Berkeley, 1 in Albany. So I guess that adds up to 9. Quick math. If I saw it written down, I'd know for sure. And so our practice is to operate limited stop service. We currently do that through Richmond and El Cerrito as well. We stop roughly every 3rd or 4th stop compared to the local service.
Right, I was just thinking of people coming northbound on, or from the San Pablo area south of there. Sounds like they could catch one of those limited stops as opposed to trying to catch the 72 Rapid and then move over 2 blocks.
Right. So the northernmost stop in Berkeley will be at Gilman Street, and so the distance from there to here on Buchanan Street is about half a mile to 3/4 of a mile, 2/3 of a mile, something like that. So for a regional express bus service, we consider that adequate spacing. We did look at many locations to stop along the way, and our preference is to use existing bus stops since it's a new service, rather than try to create new bus stops. It's just a lot easier to have our service where other service already is, especially since we have a transfer agreement with AC Transit. And so somebody can take AC Transit buses to our service, and then they can just continue our trip on our bus just for the incremental additional cost that it takes to get to Marin County.
So is there any stop on northbound San Pablo that would be appropriate as an alternative, that just kind of put it alongside the southbound?
We really wanted to stop in front of the Arco. I guess that would come as no surprise to you because that's the stop pair for San Pablo and Marin. Unfortunately, since we'll actually be actively using the stop, unlike AC Transit, which their Line Z currently serves that stop and then turns left on Buchanan Street just to here in front of City Hall. They're not carrying passengers at that point on Route Z. It's the very end of the route. However, we would actually be loading people at the ARCO, and since there's no protected movement for a bus, it's such a short block from Marin to Buchanan that we can't serve the ARCO stop and then get into the left turn lane at Buchanan to turn left. That was actually our preference originally when we field tested it, and it was just a no-go. We actually did it at 9:30 in the morning, even after the heaviest traffic had subsided, and we still had trouble making that left turn.
What about the one stop back at Monroe? Was that just odd stop spacing for you guys?
Yeah, at that point, we felt it was pretty close to the Gilman Street stop. We're not actively opposed to it, but we would rather be more in the center of Albany if possible. UC Village doesn't really have the demographic that would be riding this service since they're primarily affiliated with the university. So we want to try to be as central in Albany as possible. We could always look at having 2 stops if necessary, but it's just unfortunately as a part of the way the road network is right here in the center of town, it's just challenging to serve in the north/westbound direction.
I forgot to ask you, the stops in San Rafael, is it going to be 3rd Street or?
So it'll operate, there will be a stop at San Quentin, and then we operate on the North Frontage Road, as there's a lot of office parks along the North Frontage Road in East San Rafael. Then the bus gets back on the freeway at Bellin Boulevard and goes directly to the San Rafael Transit Center, which is in downtown. And then from there, the route will go past the corporate center, which is the location of the largest employer in San Rafael, BioMarin. And then it goes down Anderson Drive, which is an industrial area, and terminates actually in the morning in front of Wendy's. So if you guys want your breakfast biscuits, you can take our bus there.
So the proposal to extend the red curb, would that effectively remove 1 automobile parking space
Correct.
in that area? Okay. And do we know what the typical usage in that area is?
There's about 60% occupied.
Okay. All right. Any other questions?
I mean, 80% occupied, I'm
80%.
sorry. Yeah, the other one was.
Oh, yeah.
So one question relative to the sign placement there. Just looking at the photo, the sign is rather close to the traffic signal.
Right, yeah, we noticed that.
I was just curious because if we put another sign on top of the existing signs, then it potentially obstructs part of the signal. And I was hoping that we could make sure that the sign placement is done so that it doesn't create an obstruction there.
Yeah, and we definitely agree with you. We noticed that in our field work, and we typically mount on top of the pole, but the Berkeley shuttle stop actually is already mounted on top of the pole at that particular location, and it's kind of in line with the bottom of the green bulb. So we would probably have to do something a little less conventional. I know ideally you have something 7 feet off the ground, but we might have to just kind of hang it off the pole on the other side. That's something that if we get approval, I would come out with our facility superintendent and actually determine the best way to mount that to the existing pole. It's one of AC Transit's old slot-style poles, so it's not the easiest thing to work with, but you know, they're pretty crafty guys.
Okay, let's have public comment on this item. Anybody from the
We have
public
one
want to speak?
One speaker card.
I have a speaker card. Lauren.
Hi, good evening. So I'm Lauren Grady. I'm an Albany resident, and I'm very excited about the bus. I plan to take it. I know a number of people who are also going to be taking it. But I also would like to advocate that we have stops that are closer together. It sounds like from the proposal, and I understand why we can't serve the stop in front of Arco. But if we could have the 2 stops at least be across the street from each other, and I think there is a bus stop on Buchanan at Jackson in the, excuse me, in the westbound direction. So if we can at least look and see if we can serve those 2 stops, I think that'll be helpful, especially if anyone wants to bike or get to the stop, then you don't have another quarter mile between the 2 stops. So that's my request. Thank you.
Anyone else from the public who want to speak?
Can I just get a clarification from that comment? So are you talking about the stop in front of the school?
Yeah.
That's the pair? You want the stop sign? Okay.
And we're certainly willing to do that. We originally were looking at San Pablo and Marin specifically. So the stop pair that we were envisioning was the Arco and then the Gill Tract. But since we'll be around the corner, operationally, the eastbound stop, it's all new construction from the bike path. So there's actually appropriate curb space and everything, and the sign's not, blocking a traffic signal or anything like that. So we could easily have a stop pair there, but we would still like to have that San Pablo and Marin stop in the southbound direction, so we can at least have some better connectivity. And then maybe one day we can find something in a northbound direction at San Pablo and Marin that works.
Oh, can you come up to the microphone, please?
Want to put a bus stop over here?
Yeah, well, the bus stop's already there.
Right.
We would just extend it so that it's a full-length stop.
And that's where we're going to lose a space.
Yeah, so where that minivan is parked.
So, but on San Pablo, is it going to extend there too?
No, it's already like 100 and something feet. Robert, do you know?
It's a double length, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're only losing one parking
One
space.
parking space, yeah.
How wide are the buses? Are they going to block the roadway at all?
Can I ask you to move to the microphone, because this is being broadcast?
There's a bus stop already there.
Oh, okay. I just wondered
Yeah.
if the bus is going to be wider.
No, it's not gonna be
or,
wider.
And going into the roadway
It's
more.
the same width.
Okay, thank you.
The AC Transit Line Z uses the same type of equipment that we use, 40 and 45-foot buses. Yeah, 8.5 feet wide.
Okay, anybody else from the public like to comment on this? All right, discussion.
So I got a couple of observations. With removal of that parking space, and given that you've got the driveway behind it, that's going to make it a lot easier for the bus to pull over to the curb and get out of the bike lane, which seems like a positive thing to have happen there. It'll also make it easier for cars to make a right turn on red, which may alleviate some of the congestion. So the only question I have relative to that is whether we ought to stripe a right turn arrow in the bus stop area to encourage cars to get over. Because right now with the car parked there, they really don't get over until the end. They can't. And I don't know how much we want to manage that.
I think that is a good idea. We will also have to grind a little bit of the bike lane on the right.
Yeah. Well,
So I don't think we have enough width. We'll have to
Yeah, how
measure,
wide
but
is-
to actually include the bike lane in the middle of the right turn lane. But
okay.
I'll measure. I don't know yet.
Yeah, I'm not 100% on that. They're going to have to, cars that are turning are going to have to mix with the bike lane anyway. It's just they'll have a longer space to do it. So that's fine.
Let me look at there's also a curve going with the merge of Buchanan and Marine.
Right.
So let's see how feasible is that.
Yeah, I think it's far enough from the merge that we're okay. We're not going to have cars that are turning right from the prior block, driving the whole way in the parking lane, because
Right.
there's several other parking spaces.
But either that or we can put shadows on that segment of the bike lane, so we can on the south side of the lane.
Right, so the added markings in the bike lane to reinforce that it is a
yeah.
bike lane, that
Yeah.
might be sufficient. And the other observation is that that tree might need some more trimming, or the bus will just do it automatically.
We'll do that.
Our mirrors also are good at tree trimming.
Is that parking lane wide enough to function as a traffic lane if you put a right arrow in it?
The parking lane as a traffic
Yeah.
lane?
Looks about 8 feet.
No,
No. So
it's barely wide enough for a parked car, so a
Right.
moving vehicle is going to be away from the curb more, so they're going to be partially in the bike lane.
which is essentially where they are now.
Right, but they
So-
don't get to drive much length in the bike lane now. They pretty much have just the short space between that last parking space and the intersection. So most of the time, if cars are stopped on a red light, essentially from the looks of this here, 2 cars back, and if you're the third car back, you can't get through.
So really, the change you're suggesting is to change the solid white line to a dotted line farther back?
We've got the dash line. I think that's fine. I wouldn't change the solid white. I think Aleda's idea of putting sharrows or other bike lane markings in the bike lane to reinforce it are a good idea, because I think with that parked car removed, it'll be easier for cars from farther back to get around the queue to make a right turn.
Right.
Which isn't inherently bad as long as they're doing it carefully.
But were you suggesting adding another arrow on the pavement?
The right turn arrow.
Yeah, I was contemplating whether a right turn arrow would make sense, but again, I think
But
the latest comment makes more sense to me than that.
Yeah, because the right turn arrow suggests that you are treating that as a travel lane,
Right, so
which
you'd have
it
to
isn't really.
No, you'd have to put the right turn arrow to the right of the bike lane in what's essentially the parking lane of the
Yeah.
bus stop, to encourage cars to actually merge through rather than just drive down the bike lane.
In
to
front
make
of the
right
bike,
turn.
and make the right turn in front of the bike lane, which is basically what they're,
But it's what they do anyway.
Yeah, so it can potentially get better, but I think the reinforcement of the bike lane will help.
okay.
I would just have a comment on behalf of our superintendent of safety that I have to answer to for these sorts of things. If you do put up a right turn arrow, then we would need a sign at the intersection that says that
Except buses accepted.
buses accepted.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I retract that suggestion.
Yeah.
So you're retracting the suggestion?
Of a right turn arrow, yes. Bike lane
okay.
markings, I like.
I just wanted to respond that I don't think a sharrow is appropriate in that situation. It would have to be a bike symbol.
Correct.
Okay. And, the speaker from the audience has brought up an interesting point. That you're adding a new long-distance bus service to this area. Would you also be willing to add perhaps some bike racks in this area for those customers?
Just coincidentally, the city of Cotati is doing a streetscape project, and we're going to have one surplus rack starting sometime in the early spring. One rack's better than zero.
This is true. This is true.
The rack holds like 5 bikes or something, so it's nothing to sneeze at. As long as you like brown, because it's definitely brown. It's perfectly brown. But we could certainly, with the city's authorization, find a home for that. It would probably be on the south side of the street where the path is. That would probably make the most sense.
Yeah. I think that's where the most space is. Well, we would certainly welcome that. I think we're color agnostic. We have a variety of colored bike racks in our city of different colors, so.
Oh, that's good. And if the city is serious about that, certainly, Alita has my contact information, so I can put that on the on the list, since we'll have to find a home for it anyway.
Thank you for considering us.
So we've had a fair amount of discussion of different possible locations for stops, and I think that probably the final decision is not really up to this commission. It seems clear that the westbound stop has to be at this location. So we should go ahead and presumably approve the red paint extension that you're asking for. As for where the eastbound stop should be, we have a number of interesting ideas, but I would guess that has to be taken up in a different place. Or
Well, I would say that what we would seek is just the authorization to put the sign on that utility pole at San Pablo and Marin. The eastbound stop at Buchanan and Jackson wouldn't require any improvements. So typically, it may be different for the city of Albany, but in other jurisdictions that we operate in, we wouldn't have to come to the city because we would just be simply having an interaction with AC Transit since it's their pole.
But if people in Albany want to have a dialogue with Golden Gate Transit to ask you to put the stop in one place or another, is this the place to do that, or is there a different way they can engage with you about that?
You do have board meetings too, but it would be too far away for, maybe we can send a letter, is that right? A letter to your board?
It's, usually it's a fairly informal process. If somebody requests a new bus stop on a service, then we just examine it based on the conditions. If we move forward with the 2 eastbound stops and or the 1 eastbound and then the 1 southbound for the return trips, and then the 1 westbound stop in the morning. That's probably, I mean, for the first day of service would be adequate from our perspective. You know, if there was a strong desire to have another bus stop in the northbound/westbound direction, I don't know, you know, we could just kind of come to that when we get to it. If somebody
So
can
those
come
things,
up with a better
those
idea.
things
then-
can even be tweaked after the service is running?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're continually making bus stop changes. We try to match them up with our quarterly schedule changes just so that they're clear to the public. So, you know, December, March, June, September is roughly I think it's the second Sunday of those months we make schedule changes, and so that's typically when we like to put in new bus stops.
Okay.
So it's 4 times a year is a pretty good average.
I mean, it seems great I think to us in Albany that we could have 2 stops going westbound and 2 stops going eastbound. I don't know if that puts too much of a burden on your scheduling, but.
Right.
If we can find the westbound stop, you know, maybe Monroe is the answer. I would, you know, have to run that past people to see if turning left at Marin from Monroe is a problem. I don't think it is, but
Yeah, certainly the idea of paired stops makes sense to me intuitively, and if we could have a paired stop at Jackson and another paired stop, sort of almost paired along San Pablo,
yeah, definitely.
I think most people would probably be happy with that.
And that northbound Monroe stop, correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, that again would just be our sign on an AC transit pole, so we wouldn't have to go through a formal process for it.
Okay.
That's correct. A couple comments. So if we are looking at just 1 pair of stops, I think we should take or Golden Gate should consider whether it's more valuable to have the stops be paired so that there's some consistency where the passenger gets on the bus and then gets off the bus right across the street, as opposed to getting on Buchanan and then getting off on Marin. At least, well, yeah, so it won't be consistent that way. And I think it's easier from a new rider's perspective to know that, okay, I get off the bus right across the street, or I get on in the morning right across the street.
Yeah, at
So
least
there's some consistency.
At least
there.
you should be able to see from one place.
Exactly.
Where the other
so
place
going around the
is.
corner, you'll lose that, but I can understand and appreciate that you want to be closer to where the center of Albany is up at Marin. But I'm thinking with a regional type of service, which this definitely is, it's probably not a bad thing for people to have to walk down to Jackson to get on the bus. And you know, the one thing with regional service too is, yeah, the more stops that you put in, the slower that your bus is going to go. And so the one thing we don't want to end up with is, you know, a dozen people getting off at this stop and then 1 person getting off around the corner, and the bus has to stop twice for about the same amount of time, just to serve a single person. So I think I'd be fine with, and I know we don't have to. We can't comment on this, but I'd be fine with seeing a single pair of stops here at Buchanan and Jackson, and that could be the stop for the central Albany, essentially.
Do we have any concerns, since it is a regional line, for added parking pressure?
For commuter parking, you mean?
Yeah,
Adding?
That happens.
right where all the
I mean,
school
that's
and everything.
always a possibility. I know any Transbay bus tends to have that attraction. Whether it's pronounced in Albany is something that there's just, it's such a specific kind of question. We don't have data on that until the service starts. And having a stop on San Pablo might help alleviate that by not having people park in Buchanan Street area, which is very congested for parking already.
I do have data from about 5 years ago on that street, and about 60% of the cars parked there are commuters.
Dave, what are you going to do for the marketing? So part of the answer to that is there is a pretty a generous transfer policy between AC Transit buses and Golden Gate, where you're just paying the difference. So, you know, the 18 is a pretty frequent bus, and it can get you pretty close to here. It's about another block walk. So what will you guys be doing about marketing, and maybe even including, you know, how you can get to this location?
We definitely plan an extensive marketing and outreach effort for the service. There hasn't really been a significant change to the Richmond-San Rafael Bridge bus service, that's a tongue twister, since 2001, actually, starting September, I think it was September 12th, 2001, so awkward timing. But so MTC has a pot of money actually dedicated to marketing. So there'll be an extensive outreach and marketing campaign to get people informed, and that information will include ways you can get to our bus. So, biking, using the bus bike racks, using street bike racks, transferring from AC Transit routes since we have such a generous transfer policy with them, and that sort of thing.
And will you be using the 45-foot buses as well as the 40-foot coaches?
Yeah, it'll be a mix of bus types. Part of the reason why this is one of the easier routes for us to implement is a portion of the trips will actually be buses that are already deadheading between San Francisco and San Rafael. So the fastest way between the end of our route in the financial district / Soma and our bus garage in San Rafael is actually going along the East Shore Freeway. So we'll be pulling some of those trips and putting them into service as part of this route.
And do the MCIs? The
and those would
footers?
most likely be MCIs. If there's any dedicated trips, those would be the 40-foot Orions.
Do the MCIs have? Do you guys do the racks in the under compartment?
Yeah, they're luggage bay bicycle racks.
So that essentially gives you guys 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 bikes can fit on that that MCI bus. So that's something that also
just four, because we don't have front racks.
Oh, you don't have front racks?
Yeah,
on the
because
MCIs? Okay.
of in the financial district, which is where a majority of those buses run, the right turns are so tight that if we had a rack in the deployed position, we actually can't turn right in the financial district with those buses. So only 4, sorry.
But still, 4 is better than 2, which is what most.
Yeah.
And then the front racks we have hold 3 bikes as well, so it's a pretty good bike capacity.
Yeah.
And also on the regular 40-foot buses, we have a policy for the Richmond Bridge service that allows bicycles inside in the wheelchair securement area on a space available basis. Because there's no alternative way for a bicyclist to get across the Richmond Bridge. And so that's been a longstanding policy that would be extended to this route as well.
Cool.
I think we should make our motion about the red curb extension and move on.
All right, so I'd like to make a motion that we approve the red curb extension, that we ask for care in the placement of the sign, that we seek bike lane markings, and suggest consideration of a second stop location.
Can you be more specific about the bike lane markings?
Yes, standard bike lane markings. So bike symbol.
I saw a lady asking the question with her eyes.
No. I just was going to say that, what if we bring a little sketch at the next meeting?
That's fine. I think essentially what I envision is
You don't want
the
the right turn anymore, is that right?
No right turn. Just normal bike lane markings to reinforce that that's still a bike lane at that location. I think is sufficient.
So my understanding is that we have to eliminate the right dash.
No.
No? We just put it there. Okay.
Nothing has to be removed at all.
Just reinforcement.
As a reinforcement, just an extra.
Just,
okay.
yeah, add extra bike lane symbol.
Symbol.
Okay. Near the stop bar, maybe 10, 15 feet back, something like that. And slightly to the left of the lane again to reinforce that if the bike stops far enough over a car, it can still get around.
Right.
So the motion is on the floor. Is it clear, or should we?
It's clear.
It's clear. Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. Are we ready for 6B?
Yes.
Parking management study? Okay.
I have a question for staff.
Yes.
My house is located in the survey area.
I don't think that's a consideration for something like this. We're not, at this point, not making any, it's a citywide impact, really. I wouldn't be worried about any changes to programs that would affect your house. It's terrific. Thank you. Good to ask the question. So I'd like to introduce David Early with the consulting firm of PlaceWorks. PlaceWorks is working with CDM Smith, another consulting firm, on preparing for us a parking management strategy. This is a study that's being funded by the Alameda County Transportation Commission, and it's a work in progress. What you'll hear tonight is some details about the existing conditions analysis that they did. They collected some data in May, and they've run some numbers, and then some preliminary thoughts about where the study is going from here. At one point, we were thinking about trying to squeeze into everything else that's going on in the city in September, trying to squeeze in some meetings about doing some business outreach and maybe some community outreach on this study. And just the other day, we kind of felt like we didn't have the time to do adequate outreach and noticing. So we're going to push that out a little bit. It's still a very important thing for us to do. We just didn't want to not give be able to give the energy that the outreach effort deserves. So this is a check-in with you. David and Corey were kind enough to come to our Planning and Zoning Commission last night as well. And I'll now turn it over to David for his presentation.
Right. Thank you very much, Jeff. Again, I'm David Early with PlaceWorks. Carrie Stone from my office is here as well. She's the project manager for this effort. And as Jeff mentioned, we are working closely with CDM Smith, who are traffic engineers. Bill Hurl and Terry O'Connor are the key staff there. I'm going to be giving the report tonight, and then I'm happy to answer any questions you have, and we'll take notes of whatever discussion you have. As Jeff mentioned, we're really at a sort of a hinge point in the project where we've done most of the data collection. We are going to show you our reports about existing conditions tonight. We do have another white paper coming up that has not been released yet, that's about parking regulation in the city relative to housing projects. That's a report that, did it go to staff today? That we submitted to staff today on an administrative draft basis, and we anticipate that you and the public will receive it somewhere between 2 and 4 weeks from now. If you have questions about it, I could talk a little bit about it this evening, but it's not ready for review yet. Tonight I'll be talking about our other existing conditions reports. We want to hear from you about your ideas as to where we should head, and then we're going to be putting together yet another white paper on policy implications and ideas for the city, and that will be looked at, as Jeff said, we'll have kind of an extended period to prepare that and for the city to really look at it early in 2016 after projects like the general plan update and the Albany Bulb projects have also been considered by the city. There's just so much going on in the city that we don't want to move this forward in too hasty a manner. So tonight's, I'm going to give the presentation, and then we'll take any questions that you have public comment, and have your discussion about the issues. And what we're trying to do here is to really help you to create a series of strategies to manage parking in Albany. And the first thing really you need to ask yourself, and I'm afraid it's not listed here, is do you have a problem, and to what extent is there a problem? And I think you'll see in the data that citywide there's probably not really a parking problem. Occupants actually relatively all right. It's not by any means at capacity levels, but certainly we'll find hot spots, both in terms of time and in terms of place, where there are some parking issues that you probably will want to address over time. Once you have those locations and times in mind, then the questions become, well, how can you improve utilization and access, and how can you cater to different types of parkers, be they residents, shoppers, or workers who are in the area, and how do you want to prioritize them, and how do you want to best serve those different groups? So there is a schedule here just for you to look at. I'm really repeating with this slide what Jeff already told you. We've pretty much completed our existing supply assessment. We're going to be doing an assessment of future demand relative to supply, as well as this white paper on parking regulation for housing projects. We'll be doing that over the next few months. We'll be making recommendations into the early part of next year, and then we anticipate the parking management plan coming forward to the city in the spring of 2016. We have engaged a pretty robust set of meetings for this project. I actually have 2 slides about this. We are having 2 meetings with Albany businesses, both at this juncture to talk about existing needs and challenges, and later we'll be going again to talk about recommendations. We're having a meeting with Albany residents to gauge their opinions about that, and we did also do what we call an intercept survey, meaning we went out on the street and intercepted people as they were going about their business, and we asked them questions about their parking habits. And I'll be talking about this evening, we interviewed about 500 people in May of this year, 495 people, about their parking habits here in Albany. We also have this meeting before you. We will have 2 meetings, one last night and one in coming months with the Planning and Zoning Commission, and ultimately we'll be moving forward to the City Council with our final recommendations. So there's a lot of meetings as a part of this project. I want to talk a little bit about that intercept survey that I mentioned. We did collect 495 responses on 2 separate days, really going out on the sidewalks along primarily Solano and San Pablo Avenues, talking to the people who we found there and asking them how they got to the area, and if they drove, what did they do with their car when they arrived. One of the most interesting and optimistic pieces of information in this whole study for me is that when you see these first 2 lines, only 55% of the people that we intercepted had actually driven to the study areas, and a full 45% had come by other means, walking, biking, or bus. And we think that's quite a robust number. I'm not sure any of us expected the number of non-drivers to be so high, and I think it really speaks to an already existing transit and pedestrian orientation to the commercial districts, both San Pablo and Solano Avenues, as really doing, I think, what we all hope that they do here in the city of Albany, as being places that attract people by non-single occupant vehicle modes to come to the area. Among those who had driven, we found that 55% had parked either on Solano Avenue or San Pablo Avenue. 35% had parked on the adjacent residential streets, and that's not a typo. There are 10% missing, and those 10% were about 5% who had parked in a private lot somewhere off-street, and 5% who for some reason wouldn't tell us where they had parked. So we don't know about them. 55% of drivers, and this comes back to my opening comment that there's not really a system-wide problem here, a full 55% had parked within 1 block of their destination. So that's pretty healthy. About that same number felt satisfied with current time restrictions on parking in Albany on the public streets. 59% were satisfied with parking availability, and we say here over half, it's really about the same number, 59%, said that they would not want to be paying for parking, which again to me is an interesting number because of course nobody wants to pay for parking. So that tells us that there were 30 or 40% who either had no opinion or actually said they would be willing to pay for parking. And considering that it's not that anybody's talking about paying for parking here, but it's actually a relatively robust number who out of the box, without ever having thought about it necessarily, said, yeah, maybe I could pay if I absolutely had to. So that's perhaps food for thought over the long term. Although again, this project is not about trying to get parking to be priced here. We're not sure that there's a problem that would warrant that at this time. We did go on and do a study of parking utilization. When I gave this presentation last night, there were some questions, so I want to give a little more detail than I did last night about just how we collected this data. We're showing you both weekday parking as well as weekend parking data. Some of the weekday data primarily was collected for this study by a subcontractor to CDM Smith. With some exceptions, the weekend parking data is actually from a study conducted by MTC for value parking pricing, so there are 2 different data sources. The weekend parking collection was all on a manual basis. The weekday parking collection was primarily using a machine that goes along and photographs the license plate numbers, and then it's assessed via computer, although because of the technology involved, all the one-way streets had to be done manually for our study as well. So one-way streets are always conducted manually. Two-way streets on weekdays were by machine. This graph shows the overall parking supply on weekdays, parking occupancy, on weekdays. And this comes back to my beginning point that overall, there's really not a severe problem. We all consider professionally that parking is full or occupied at about 85%. You don't want to get to 100% because then there's no turnover, no place to park a car. A 15% vacancy is about a healthy amount that people can find a place to put their car, but you have robust occupancy of the spaces. And you're here beginning of the day at around 40%, going up pretty quickly to the middle of the day, and then flattening out at about 60% in both study areas, and maintaining pretty constant right around or below 60% through the course of the day. So there's a pretty big gap study area wide between that 60% capacity and the 85% that we would continue to be fully occupied. Delving a little deeper, this chart shows you the weekday, midday occupancy. And I would point out that you have these charts on a larger basis in the written report. And we do have some extra copies if any of you don't have your report tonight. We have some, the paper copy as well. Ken, I don't know if you've got one.
We're sharing.
You're sharing, okay, because we do have some. And I might point out at this juncture, we did find embarrassingly a few errors in the report today or last night. So we have a new version that has those corrected. There were some inadvertent references to parking meters, and there are no parking meters in Albany. So that was corrected, and I think, did they all get a new copy? So you got a new copy with those corrections.
I just uploaded
today.
it.
Yeah. And members of the audience, if you haven't gotten the revised version, we're happy to give those to you as well. So this chart does show weekday, midday occupancy, and it's figure 3 in the report. And you can see here that there are a number of streets where that midday occupancy is shown as green or light green, which indicates less than 50 or 50 to 70% occupancy. But there are also a few key streets, both along Solano and San Pablo themselves, and then on a few of the side streets where occupancy is much higher during the midday. And similarly, you have similar occupancy patterns later in the day on weekdays, and in fact, a little more occupancy later in the day. And that results from the fact that midday, many residents have left, and so you only have people going into the commercial areas there for either work or shopping who are parking on those side streets. By the evening, you still have businesses in operation, but you also have residents coming back home, and so you've got sort of double duty, and hence higher occupancy on some of the block faces later in the day. This graph shows you the number of hours that individual block faces are at the full 85% capacity over the course of a weekday. And you can see most of the streets are blue and green, which indicates 0 or just a few hours. But again, there are a few streets which have 6 to 8 or even over 8 hours of 85% or more capacity. One of the things that we discussed at some length last night is that, interestingly, those tend to be the side streets on the side of the street where you're driving away from the major street. And when you think about that, that sort of intuitively makes sense, that a parker comes down Solano or San Pablo, says, I'm not going to be able to park here, or I'm not allowed to park here because I'm staying a longer period of time. They turn onto the side street, and as they're driving away, they take the first parking space they can find. Later in the day, perhaps those spots are all full on the outbound side of the street, and then a parker who needs to park on the street goes to the end of the street, makes a U-turn, and parks for a shorter period of time on the return direction. And that's why you see a pretty consistent pattern where on the same street, the outbound direction is fully occupied for a large number of hours, and the inbound direction is occupied for a shorter number of hours on that same street. This shows the overall average weekday parking duration. You find, of course, relatively short durations on the two main streets themselves because those are signed for short duration. You find longer durations on many of the side streets, presumably because people are parking there either as residents or, more likely, we think, as workers, employees who are parking for those businesses. And so you see that indicated on this weekday parking duration map. This graph does give, or chart gives an overview of the overall occupancy, and again, the numbers are the ones I've looked at before, talked about before, so that in each of the 2 study areas, again, we're up at the close to 60%, but really never over it on both San Pablo and Solano, and of course, those average out for the study area to be similar numbers as well. On weekends, we have a similar kind of pattern. Actually, it doesn't vary a tremendous amount at all from the weekdays. In terms of capacity, the percent occupied at the midday, you find relatively high percent occupied, particularly on some of the side streets where people may be parking for work. And we find those particularly as you move east on Solano Avenue, the side streets off of Solano Avenue further east. And this is where parking meters do come into the equation. Because Berkeley has parking meters, we believe that some people who are needing to park close to Berkeley on Solano are probably coming into Albany's neighborhoods and parking on those streets instead. In the evening, the pattern is relatively similar, and again, we see a little bit higher occupancy, particularly on some of the streets parallel to San Pablo Avenue, where some of the densities of housing are a little higher. Again, we're finding, in this case, probably people both working and shopping and coming to their residences at that hour. And then we also see an amalgamation of higher occupancy on the streets that are closer to Berkeley along Solano Avenue. So I want to, having given you that background data, I want to just shift gears and talk a little bit about some of the issues. Again, probably not an overall parking problem in this overall study area, but there are some hot spots in terms of both times and places that you might want to be addressing. And if you're going to do that, what you need to start to be considering are going to be issues about allocating this parking resource. We can do that thinking about actually the physical space that's available, perhaps trying to make more space, although I'll talk a little bit about how that might be difficult here in Albany. What we can do otherwise is regulate the demand, and we can regulate people's behavior as to how that affects demands. And so I'll talk a little bit about that as I go forward, but really what that comes down to is thinking about trying to move forward in educating the public, educating workers, educating residents and shoppers to try and change perceptions and attitudes, to try and change the day-to-day experience, and to help people to find transportation alternatives so that the pressure for parking gets even lower than it already is. So some example implementation strategies that you might look at in some of these places or at key times would be streetscape and lighting improvements that can encourage people to park once and then walk to multiple destinations, wayfinding and signage so that people can find parking quickly and easily and know where the places are likely to be that they will find a parking spot. You could look at parking pricing or additional time limits in order to modify or regulate the demand. You could encourage visitors even more so to access Solano and San Pablo by walking and biking in transit. And you might even consider a residential parking permit program if you do find that there are streets that warrant that, so those residential side streets that are going through a lot of pressure and have higher occupancies over the course of the day. Perhaps a residential parking permit program would be appropriate. In looking at all of those strategies, as I said before, you do need to consider who the implicated parties will be, who are you trying to serve. There can be differing needs among residents, employees, and customers. Customers, for example, want to come for a shorter period of time, park conveniently, stay a short time, and then go, relatively short, maybe an hour or two, whereas an employee or a resident is probably going to want to park for a longer period of time and then becomes a competitor, so to speak, with the business parker, the shopper parker who is looking for a shorter period of time and is adding to the economic vitality of the area. One thing you probably can't really consider is adding additional parking spaces. And there's a number of reasons for that that in the end boil down to supply of land and cost. So I think many of you know this. Parking is extremely expensive to provide. Current numbers in the Bay Area say about $28,000 on average for a parking space, and those numbers can go up to $50,000 and $60,000 per space for a structured space, and particularly for an underground structured space. So even a surface parking lot can be $7,000 to $10,000 for a single parking space. And of course, land along these commercial corridors in Albany is in such a premium that you're probably not going to be able to do plain surface parking anyway. So very expensive to do that parking. And in addition to the parking cost, and the city's lack of funds to put out for, say, a public parking structure or public parking lot, there's also a very constrained land supply. And if you did have a supply of land that you could think about building something new on, with the housing situation the way it is, you'd probably want to put multiple stories of housing there to help supply housing for the community, and then you'd be even more constrained in terms of where you could put parking. So it's difficult from the perspective of land supply, it's difficult from the perspective of cost, and this comes back also to this question of how parking supply affects housing costs. You do have relatively strong parking regulations under Measure D in Albany that require what, when we look at it Bay Area wide, a relatively high number of parking spaces per unit in Albany, and those are in fact driving up the cost of supplying housing. So if you're requiring even an extra half a space on average for a housing unit, that's literally adding probably $30,000 or $40,000 to the cost of a single housing unit that might be built in the city. So that's the thing that we'll be addressing in this paper that you'll be getting within the next 2 to 4 weeks, to look at housing and parking regulation in the city. This does look at parking pricing throughout the Bay Area. Again, we're not recommending pricing at this time. We are aware that many folks in Albany who come here to shop, and certainly business owners, perceive that there's a real advantage for Albany in having zero cost to park on the street here. That is a real bargain relative to just about any other city in the Bay Area. Most cities in the Bay Area are charging somewhere between $1 and $2 an hour for 1 to 2 hour parking. As time length gets longer, many cities actually lower the price per hour for that parking, although some cities, in order to encourage people to park for shorter periods of time, are actually charging more per hour if you stay a longer time than they charge for a shorter period of time. So you can study this in more detail if you're thinking about it, but we're not sure that you're going to be looking at pricing in the near future anyway. But you probably will be looking at continued enforcement and regulation of various types. You may want to look at a residential permit parking program. You may want to look at other time limits on some streets, or changing time limits along Solano or San Pablo. No one loves enforcement by any means, but it's important to remember, whether it's enforcement of time limits or pricing or a residential permit program, that where you don't have any sort of enforcement, you're really creating a situation that has no rules and is a free-for-all. You're not regulating the supply in any way, and there are times when it's appropriate to try and regulate the supply. So what we'd like to hear from you tonight is what your impressions are of this data. We hope you've had a chance to review it already, even before tonight. Any impressions you have that will guide us in our work as we're putting together a set of recommendations that will come back to the city in a few months. And of course, we want to hear from the public as well as from all of you. I can answer any questions you have. Carrie is here and can help with technical questions if they come up. If they're super technical questions, we may have to punt and get back to you in writing, going through CDM Smith, but we're happy to answer everything we can and then take your comments this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have one quick question about the outreach that you showed at the beginning. Can you clarify which parts of the outreach you've already done and which parts are to come?
So we have not done either of the business meetings yet. We have not yet done the resident meeting, and we're thinking of doing that this month, but have decided to defer that so that there's a longer period of time to get other things done. We have completed the intercept survey already. Tonight's meeting is half completed. We already did the one Planning and Zoning Commission meeting last night, but we will have another one later in the project, and we will go to the City Council at the end of the project.
Okay, thank you. Other questions from the Commission?
The getting a gauge of what employees are doing, will that be in the employer survey, or was some of that captured in the intercept survey?
The intercept survey did capture the question of why are you here, and we got about 20% employees within that number, although there were a pretty high number of people who, again, declined to state why they were there. So we might have had, there were really about 25% who we didn't get that data from. So, about a third of the people that we did find were employees, and that did identify their reason for being there. So it may have been a full third of the whole group.
And so in your next report, will you be able to query data based upon the employees
Yeah, we
to see
had
what their
some
specific
questions
behaviors
about
were.
that last night as well. We have not tried yet to disaggregate the data to find out, for instance, length of parking or how many walked versus drove among the employees, but that was asked last night, and I think we will try and do at least a little bit on that. Last night, people were also asking, can we correlate length of parking with the reason for being there? And unfortunately, those are two separate studies. So we aren't actually able to, we don't know which car that we saw parked for a certain length of time was associated with what kind of person, because they were two different studies.
Okay, let's take public comment.
Could you please fill out a form if you want to speak? That is in the back of the room.
You can do it afterwards if you want to speak first, just so we get everyone's name in the minutes correct.
So would anybody like to speak about this? It's all you.
My name is Rhoda Bennett. I live at 950 Cornell Avenue, Albany, California, since about 1976. And I appreciated your report tonight and your professionalism. So who did you say was paying for this? The transportation?
Alameda County Transportation
They're
Commission.
paying for the whole cost for all that they're doing?
Yes.
Albany's not paying anything? Wow. Do you happen to know how much that is? Wow.
We're working on a single contract. We have a single contract with the ACTC, as it's called, the Alameda County Transportation Commission, that combined two grant applications from two separate cities, Albany and San Leandro. And they're related projects in that they have similar scopes of work and they're both about parking, but they're completely separate in terms of products and presentations. And each of them is about $100,000 for a total contract value of about $200,000.
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad you caught the boo-boo about the parking meters, because I was going to ask where they were at. On page, it doesn't have a page, but it says Table 5, Weekday Occupancy Comparison. There's a footnote down here at the very bottom. It says some streets were closed for street sweeping during the morning data collection period, and as such, these streets inventories were omitted from this time period. The resulting occupancy percentages reflect the occupancy with the availability supply at that time period. Well, I live on Cornell, and our street sweeping is on a Thursday. Do you know specifically which streets weren't included? Because I don't see any asterisks by any.
I don't know that. We have to ask. We can send an email back to Alita. Maybe she can get your email address and let you know. But I assume we can find out from the collection.
So I was looking for these little asterisks somewhere to go along with your footnote, and I didn't see anything. Okay. Okay. When you did.
I do want to point out that those were morning only. So the midday and afternoon are complete for everyone.
Okay, I'm glad you said that, because our street sweeping time on our street is, I think, you can't park 10 to 2, all right? So even though the street sweeper comes by early morning, you cannot park there until after 2 o'clock, because you can still get a ticket. So that would affect even your midday times as well. And then also it pushes more traffic onto the other side of the street. But it is, like on our street, it's 10 to 2. Okay?
So
I just wanted you to know, it wasn't just the morning.
I should also. So let me we'll try and get to the bottom of all of that, but as I understand the footnote, we have not, because I don't think you're closed for street sweeping every day. And so I think what this means is that there was no conflict at midday or afternoon. So when we came to Cornell Street in the midday, it was, I would presume, on a day of the week that there is not street sweeping, and hence there was no problem. There were some streets in the morning period only on the days we did the data collection where there was a conflict. And so we'll make sure that was the case, but I think we can conclude that on Cornell, for example, there was never a conflict, because conflicts were only in the morning and your street sweeping isn't in the early morning, and hence you weren't affected. But we'll make sure of it.
Okay. Okay. Are you going to be dealing with like safety issues too, along with the parking? Okay, let's say on the corner of Cornell, years ago, they used to have a yellow zone near the beginning of the street at Solano and Cornell. And we have a rest home there, and we also have an elementary school and a post office. It's a very busy intersection. But years ago, there used to be a loading zone there, and now it's a parking spot. And what's happening is to, I guess, provide more parking or whatever over the years, it's now a parking spot. And what it's doing is making it very unsafe there because it's very narrow, and there's no crossing guards anymore, and it's a very dangerous intersection or area. And
Rhoda, excuse me for a second. I think it would be best if you address the commission.
Oh, okay. So I just wondered if
your observations about the report.
If they're looking at those kind of issues, because it is a parking kind of thing too, but if they're concerned about safety as well as finding parking spaces or counting them. And did they count the parking spaces? Because I know it talks about how many occupancy and percentages, but I don't see anything about how many parking spaces there are on all these different streets.
I think it is there, right?
There's a
Parking spaces at the
there's
top.
total parking spaces
Yeah.
for the region, and I don't think it goes street by street.
For some of these things, Rhoda, perhaps you can meet with us and we'll get some of the details, unless the commission really wants to get into this.
Okay. Also, weekday occupancies. Okay, and they use some studies from 2014, October, the MTC value-priced pilot parking project, and it talks about 9 a.m. There was 5 different times that there was data collected, and I only see, I think, 2 that are in here, and it kind of leads us to think that it's all in here. Is it going to all be included, what they found in 2014? Because not all the
I think we need to move on to a more general discussion.
That
A lot of
study in
these-
2014 is a big study. It's region-wide, so they only extracted a table or 2 from the study to include in this. That's it.
Okay.
As we
Well,
spoke.
I was just kind of looking for all the data from that, instead of just 2 of them.
I think what staff is suggesting as commission is that perhaps you could set up a separate meeting, and to the extent needed, then you can ask the questions of staff, and if there are specific questions that staff can't answer, they can then get back to us and we'll provide you with whatever other data you want.
Okay, I have one other question. You talk about meeting with residents. How will we be notified, and are you going to pick and choose who you want to talk to, or is the public going to be notified that you're having a residential meeting so we can come?
So the city will take responsibility for the notification. We will use all of our usual mechanisms for reaching out to people on the city's webpage, our newsletter, and outreach with the various organizations that have an interest in this. So I mean, we'll try to publicize it as we do many of our other public meetings on different subjects.
And if I'm not mistaken, it will be an open meeting for all.
Of course, it's a completely open meeting. It will probably be here. It'll also almost certainly be televised, so if someone misses it and wants to hear what happened, we'll do that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else from the public like to speak about this?
So I have some question about Dave. I think the study data that you show here is from one workday and one weekend. And so you use this data to represent the Albany parking current existing condition. I'm just wondering, based on your experience, how representative of this data on this particular 2 days represent the whole Albany parking existing condition? So how do you verify that based on your experience?
Well, we have no reason to think that these 2 days, Tuesday, May 19th, it's actually 3 days, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, May 19th, 20th, and 21st, were different from other weekdays. There was no special event those days. There was nothing of particular significance. The other interesting thing is that the data that we collected on those 3 weekdays matches very, very closely to the data that MTC collected on a pair of weekend days in 2014. So we think it's probably pretty accurate, and the fact that those 2 sets of data collected at 2 different times of year, a little less than a year apart, matched each other. We think that further confirms for us that it's correct, but it's true. It may be that if you go collect this on a different day this week, you may get a somewhat different response or result, but we don't think you'll get a very significant one.
And just to add to David's comment, we in reviewing planning applications, we're frequently doing parking surveys, more isolated, concentrated ones. But I think the results are generally what we expected to see. The hot spots on Solano Avenue are kind of the upper Solano area.
Yeah.
And then there's some isolated streets just, by the Albany Theater in the evenings, that kind of thing. You just see that. Where there's some areas.
Alita tonight was talking about Jackson when you were talking about the bus stop, and she said you have a parking study from 5 years ago of Jackson in particular, and it was spot on with what's in this report. So
I also have data for 30 days actually on San Pablo Avenue, and it's very similar to what you have presented here. 30 days in February 2014.
Okay, well, let's have commission discussion. Any thoughts?
So thanks for the data. It's a really good baseline for us to start thinking about how we do parking management in the city. And I think there's some really good programs out there. So City of Berkeley has one of the most recent ones, and there's others in the Bay Area, Redwood City, and a lot down south. But City of Berkeley has the Go Berkeley program, which is really great, and it really focuses on business corridors and looks at employee parking and employee travel habits. So if there's anything that goes forward from this and an action from the city, it really should look at transportation very holistically. And so we don't want to make sure we jump the gun and do something on just parking alone, but we should also look at all the other alternative modes so that if we are looking at pricing for parking or any other things to restrict parking, that all the other modes are easily available and accessible. But I think it's a very good baseline for us to start having those types of discussions. I'm pretty new on the commission, relatively new to Albany, so it kind of boggles me a little bit that we don't charge for parking, but I'm sure there's lots of reasons for that.
I mean, I guess my main reaction is being a commissioner, we just constantly hear from people in public comment on all sorts of issues, regardless of the issue. People are always saying, oh, and by the way, it's too hard to park, which makes me feel a little bit surprised to hear you saying that our overall usage of our parking resource is not too high, and yeah, maybe a few hotspots. I mean, when I looked at the graph, at the maps in the report, my impression was, wow, that's a lot of red, suggesting that it's true there are plenty of parking spaces in Albany compared to the number of cars, but we aren't doing enough to distribute them and to make use of the places where there's too much parking that's not being used, and to balance that out with the few places where it seems very tight. So I'm just a little bit surprised that the idea of pricing seems so out of the question to you, and wondering if you would just suggest more use of time limits, which sometimes seem to me like just a less flexible alternative, and pricing gives people the option of choosing to stay a short time and pay little, or stay a long time and pay more. But
well, we certainly aren't going to discourage you from looking at pricing. My understanding is Albany does have a very long history of not charging for parking. I believe it's actually mandated by the voters, and also mandated by the voters is the residential parking requirement. The City Council has already directed through the general plan and directed to staff that you consider a ballot measure to change the residential parking requirements in new residential construction. I think there's a feeling that politically one should do one thing at a time, and that the residential issues and the costs that they're creating for new housing are even more important than the issue of parking pricing, particularly given this 60% occupancy in a study area overall. So I think it's a matter of doing maybe one thing at a time and changing slowly, and that there are, when you look at the data you see, I mean, that hotspot of heavy parking usage next to the city of Berkeley does suggest that people come across the city limit to get away from those parking meters in Berkeley. So I think there is kind of anecdotal information even in this data that says that people do appreciate the fact that there's no price for parking in Albany. That said, if you and the Planning Commission and ultimately the City Council wanted to look at a parking pricing program, we can certainly help you to think about that. We've already done some brainstorming about, for instance, would you begin with a pilot program to let Albany residents see what it's like and perhaps do it on that eastern portion of Solano close to Berkeley where people are sort of used to it anyway and where Berkeley's parking pricing is having an effect. Maybe you try it out there, see what effect it has. Maybe you look at one particularly highly parked area of San Pablo also. We could help you to do a pilot program. But again, I think that politically speaking, you want to be careful about doing one thing at a time. The other thing, just to mention it, that we talked about last night, and I think is very important to say, is that if you do start to look at pricing, I think you should begin out of the box by being very clear. It's in order to regulate the supply and enhance the availability of supply. It's not about revenue, because what the broad public often thinks is, oh, the city's just trying to make money by charging at the parking meter. And really, the amount of money you make, you probably want to plow it back into improvements along those streets themselves, enhancing transit, enhancing bikeways. It can be a win-win, but you're probably not going to do it just to feather the city's coffers. And that's a very important message to get across to people so that residents understand it's being done in order to make parking more available for everyone. The money's going to be plowed back into making parking more available to everyone, and it's not about revenue enhancement.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Is there anything preventing us from charging for parking in some districts if we decide to, or?
We would have to
do
do some amendments to the municipal code. There would be some work that would need to happen.
Okay, but it wouldn't need a ballot measure?
I would need to research that. I'm not sure if there's a voter mandate not to charge for parking. No.
Yeah. Regarding your comment about doing one thing at a time, I do appreciate that. On the other hand, as Robert said, if you're going to make a change that makes one thing more difficult, it's helpful to make another change at the same time that makes something else easier. And to my mind, charging for parking makes parking easier. So if we're going to change, if we're going to say that we're going to have less parking less parking associated with housing units, it seems like one logical consequence of that is some people may choose to have cars and park them on the street at their house. And if that's going to cause more pressure on the parking we have in certain zones, it seems like adding pricing is a good mitigating factor. I know some people will see charging for parking as making it harder to park, but if we can present that as a way to make it easier to park by balancing the supply and demand better, then I think it might be possible to bring those together as a coherent package.
I'd like to respond to one of the first things you said, putting charging for parking aside for a moment. I want to go back to what you said about maybe adjusting parking time limits. And actually looking at these charts, I think the parking time limits are working. Parking on Solano is generally available, often more so than the adjoining streets. And so we have parking available in front of the businesses. I think that is working. Now, it would be hard to implement timed parking on the adjacent streets because those are residential.
Mm-hmm. That's where we need a permit system.
Right. And then we need to look at a permit system, yeah. I had a couple other comments. I find the whole issue of staff or business employee parking to be quite intricate. I live a half block off Solano on Santa Fe, and there are a number of restaurant workers who sleep in their cars on our block. My neighbor is nodding his head over there. It's an interesting phenomenon. They have nowhere else to go. You know, the restaurants close between 2 and 5 or so, and they use their car as a sleeping or a napping or just a hangout area. It's also interesting to me, I know when Berkeley was investigating their parking, I heard a presentation of their report, and they actually found that a large proportion of the proprietors of the businesses were parking in the time-limited slots in front of their businesses. Which, you know, they're certainly allowed to do, but that does prevent customers from parking in those spots. So there are a lot of interesting sidelines that we need to keep aware of.
For people sleeping in their cars, it seems like a perfect opportunity to use market forces to encourage them to drive their car 5 minutes to a place where it's not crowded and where there's no pressure, and then they can sleep in their car there and not take away needed spaces from someone else.
Well, I guess I'm responding to one of the goals is to encourage employees to take transit.
Yes.
And I'm saying that that can be difficult to do if they have to use their car as a lounge.
It's true, depending on your hours, that could be very difficult.
I think that's all I have for now.
If we were to venture into the time limits on residential streets with permits, the purpose of the permit would be to override the time limit. So if you have the permit, then you can park as long as you want. Do cities generally make those permits available to any resident of the city, or just people on that block, or anybody who wants to buy one?
Generally, it's done in a zone. So in Berkeley, for instance, there are zones, I think, right now through pretty far down into the alphabet. I think like S or T. So that's about 20 different zones. And a zone might be 10 to 20 blocks. And so if you live in that 20-block zone, you can get a permit for that zone, but your permit's not good in the other zones. San Francisco does essentially the same thing.
And if you live outside the zone, then you cannot get a permit.
Right. If you live outside all zones, you can't get a permit at all. You can only get a permit if you live in the zone for that zone.
Can you get as many permits as you want?
You can only get a permit for a car that's registered at an address in the zone. So if you have 5 cars and they're all registered at your address, you can get 5 permits, but it's 1 per car or vehicle that's registered in the zone. And that's the rule in Berkeley, at least, and I think that's about how it works in San Francisco.
And are the permits generally priced low enough that it's just kind of a nominal, like the cost of the transaction rather than the paying for the parking?
I think it depends what you call nominal. In both Berkeley and San Francisco, they are about $40 or $50 a year at this point. And I'm a Berkeley resident in one of those zones. When I write that check for $50 each year, I feel a little bristly about it. And then I think to myself, well, you know, it's the price I pay for living in a pretty great neighborhood that a lot of people want to come to and park during the day. And I'm very happy that I know there'll probably be a parking space for me somewhere on my block because of this permit process, which definitely wouldn't be there without the permit. But you know, $50 is kind of steep. It's $1 a week, right? But I'm not paying $1 a week. I'm paying $50 at once, and that feels a little high priced at that point.
On the other hand, if it's estimated to cost about $9,000 a year to own a car, then you're paying less than 1% of that for your parking permit. Right. So it's a pretty good deal by that logic.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of comments, unless someone else wants to go first.
Go.
So on the topic of RPP, yes, the permits do not cover the cost of operating the system. So currently, the general fund is subsidizing the RPP. We'd have to increase it by about 25% more over what it is now.
So even the $50 a year is not.
That's not break even. Council didn't want to bring it all the way up to break even at one shot because it was a big jump. And
You're speaking about Berkeley's program?
Berkeley's program. I work for the city of Berkeley. So there are other ways to do it. Right now, the RPP in Berkeley is 2-hour time limit. Unless you have a permit, then you have essentially unlimited time. But of course, the problem is the residents pay to park in their neighborhood. Everyone else parks for free for up to 2 hours during the hours of enforcement, which is typically the hours that residents are at work. So you come home. If you get home after 6 o'clock, the permit enforcement has stopped. In the evenings, it doesn't help you. During the day, it helps. you want it to help during the evening, you changed the time limits to later. Now you got to have parking enforcement officers there later. The other thing that Berkeley discovered with the 2-hour time limit is that you get the big parking shuffle. Every 2 hours, employees run out and move their cars. So you still have them driving. You also have them cold starting their cars every 2 hours to move to the other side of the block, either adding congestion as they circulate trying to find parking, or at least causing more emissions that are unnecessary, and it inconveniences them. So it's not super effective unless you've got license plate reader technology in your enforcement that says you got to move out of the zone after 2 hours. You can't just move down the block or onto the next street. You've got to move half a mile or more. That, again, adds to the cost. One of the things that we did with the Go Berkeley program was, in addition to changing the parking pricing and time limits, which were intended to minimize some of the inconvenience, but maybe encourage some people to change their behaviors, was to provide 1,000 transit passes for 1 year to downtown employees. To say it's going to cost you more to park if you park at a meter, unless you take one of these free passes and just commute by transit instead. Now, we can't take the $100,000 that we paid for 1,000 passes and scale that down to, say that it's $100 per pass, because the fewer you get, the less cost effective it's going to get. But, or if you want to do that ongoing, that was just a one-time shot.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you have any data on how effective or utilized those were?
About 25% got a fair level of use. I mean, there's a lot of permits that got handed out that really never got used. Okay. Most of them got some use. It was a relatively low percent that used them extensively.
But that's why they're cheap, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
why
they're
you
free.
can get them for $100.
The city paid $100 per.
Right. But the reason that
the
reason that the transit agency would sell them to the city for $100 each is that they expect only
In part, there's an expectation of that. So, again, but I think the point is that you need to provide an incentive for people to change their behavior. And what I would say in the context of the data that you've got, and if there's any more opportunity to dig into it and cross-reference things relative to how the data was collected, one would be to look at the location. Is it on the commercial corridor or on the side street? In other words, is it in a time-limited zone or is it in an untime-limited zone? Because the expectation is that on the commercial corridor, you're mostly getting the customers because they only need to stay for a certain amount of time. Before we changed the Solano time limits to 90 minutes, it used to be an hour, and we got a lot of complaints about citations. People couldn't stay long enough to have lunch, and they'd get a ticket, and it was terrible. And I haven't heard so much of that since we changed the time limit. It may happen once in a while, but okay. So the time limit changes seem effective. I think the suggestion of wayfinding and signage to let people know kind of where they can find parking, some of the things that are easy and inexpensive can help. The people who have the ability to sort of, or the inclination maybe in some cases, to park a couple blocks away instead of, I can't find the spot on the block where my store or restaurant is that I'm going to, so I'm going to go somewhere else, are the employees. You come once a day, every day, you get into a habit, fine, I can walk 2 blocks to work, versus I'm here for lunch and I don't have time to go find parking and walk. So I think any data analysis that can sort of take the information you've got and sort of divide it up and say, how did it look by resident, employee, or customer? How did it look on the corridor and on the parallel streets? I think would be useful to see. And just that recognition of we can't do just one thing. That if we were to do meters, we'd push a lot more people onto the side streets. So then, okay, now you have to think about doing RPP concurrently, or do you wait and see what the pain is and then do it? And if we're not at a high % occupancy, but we have hot spots, you don't really want to put meters on 2 blocks of Solano, and then the next couple blocks have no demand, so you don't put meters there. Because if you don't have enough demand, you can't really afford the meters. You don't generate enough revenue to pay for the system. So I tend to view meters as kind of the last resort after we've tried other simple things to tweak people's behavior. So So that's probably plenty to have put forth, and maybe a little bit of analysis and just some thought for us as well.
Do you want to respond to anything?
I want to thank all of you for some really insightful comments. I don't know if there are other comments from any of the rest of you, but all of you who have spoken, I think you've made very, very wise comments. You've suggested some further analysis we may be able to do if the data does allow us to cross-reference it, and even more so, I appreciate hearing some of the directions that you all think we should explore, and those are, it gives us good food for thought and good direction as to what we might look at as this study proceeds.
Anybody else want to add any comments?
So when you do these studies and make recommendations, do you ever have the occasion to see the results implemented? And I guess kind of to everybody's point, we do one thing and then it causes something else over here and over here. Mm-hmm. There is a lot of talk about permits in different areas and that are included actually in the study. But it's a concern to me. You do a permit, you exclude the employees, then you can't get the commercial, the businesses can't flow very well. So.
Yeah. Well, yes, I mean, we track both our own work and the work of others, and we do know something about what the results are, and I would concur with all the things that you've already heard, that, in RPP, as an example, it does have this unintended consequence that employees, rather than just not driving or parking somewhere else, what they do is they go and move their car every 2 hours. Right. I can speak both from professional literature and anecdotally from my own neighborhood. I know that, I live on Vine Street, a block from Pete's Coffee. So I hear all the time from the employees who work half a block away, I'm going to go move my car because my 2 hours are up. And so I know that happens, and we know it from the literature as well. And at the same time, Ventura, for instance, is an example of a city that had essentially no parking regulation on its main street. They did put in parking meters just along the main street, and they started pricing the parking on the main street and moved people around the corner onto where there was a price of zero, and it had the exact effect that they wanted in terms of freeing up parking spaces for short-term visitors on the main street and moving the employees and others around the corner and onto side streets. My sense is that here actually your problem isn't nearly as severe as Ventura's was in the downtown. I'm not sure it's worth doing the pricing, given that your occupancy, even on Solano, is relatively okay. I don't know for sure that you have a problem that warrants addressing in that way, but certainly the literature shows that if you do have a problem, pricing will make a difference in where it gets people to park.
Do we have time for one more public comment? You might give her time. Yeah. How about 2 minutes?
My name is Rhoda Bennett. Now that we've brought up and wanting parking meters, I am one of the original people who fought parking meters in this city and who got the voters to be able to vote for it, to not have them. And I will put my war bonnet on, and I will fight you tooth and nail. Again, you can count on it. My basis for not wanting parking meters is I looked at the history of El Cerrito. If you notice, Berkeley coming into Albany, El Cerrito going out, only at the top of Solano do you have parking meters. Everybody else is free. The plaza is free. You can shop in Emeryville for free. Why would people come and shop at our little stores in Albany when they can go other places and shop for free? Okay, they already get tickets if they don't, stay so long and all that. But if you look at the history of El Cerrito used to have them. Okay, I can't remember the year, but they did. And the mayor at that time didn't want the parking meters because he thought it would hurt the city of El Cerrito, and he owned a pharmacy. And what the people did on the council is they ousted that mayor and put in somebody else who would vote for the meters. Okay? They took that man off because he was against it. They put the meters in, and it was driving away all the businesses. They were losing it. They were going out of business because of the parking meters. So they ended up doing a study and putting bags over the heads of the meters to see if the people would come back. And they did. And the meters were removed. So it can hurt your businesses too. And I don't think our business district is that strong, especially with this bad economy and people not having very much money. I lost a whole bunch of money from my IRS. Okay, I will go somewhere else and park for free. And I also live off of Solano. We also have a bad problem with parking there already. You give us permits. That's like a tax to every single person that lives off Solano.
Thank you.
And then we have to park down on Marin when people come to Solano.
Thank you. I think we need to move on.
The parking meters. So it's going to cause a lot more problems. So you really want to look at all of those issues. Thank you.
Okay, let us move on to, where are we? 6D, traffic calming proposal for 800 block of Santa Fe at the intersection of Washington. Thank you to the consultant for the parking study, by the way.
I need to recuse myself for this. And inadvertently, some of my comments were forwarded to you or are in printed material that you have. Please ignore those. I'm not allowed to participate because I live on the block.
Okay, this is the roundabout. Well, I'm going to give you a little bit of background. This started in 2012 or 13 when there were concerns about speeding on the 800 block of Santa Fe Avenue. We conducted a speed survey and it came up at about 29 miles per hour in the high in the high end of the 85th percentile. And the volume was almost 4,000 cars per day. So according to our policy for speed hump, we should implement speed humps on streets that are less than 3,000 vehicles per day. We talked extensively at that time on alternative traffic calming, like striping an H line next to the parking lane and having some bulb outs at the intersection of Santa Fe and Solano, and breaking the straight line, which is basically what is also causing this speeding, is because it's a straight line along the 800 block and the 700 block of Santa Fe Avenue. So with that, we thought about, I remember we thought about this intersection having a raised crosswalk or a set of raised crosswalks. We do have a stop sign there I think it's a four-way stop sign. And we also had a red curb at the intersection of Solano and Santa Fe. At the time, we were actually doing actually developing the plans for the ATP, for the striping and signage project, and we decided to actually amend the contract and have Fair and Pierce develop a conceptual design for the ideas that we had. Here's Ryan McLean, Fair and Pierce, who developed this conceptual schematic for the roundabout and the bulb out at the intersection with Solano. This is the intersection with Washington Avenue. This is basically, I have to apologize for the delay in bringing this to this commission, but we were very concentrated on the striping and signage plans of the ATP. And as you know, it took a little bit of time to actually process those. So right now we can devote some time to this conceptual design. We wanted to bring it here because just wanted to see how the residents receive this concept and other perhaps tweaking it or having other possibilities. I want to say that this is a dome because we understand and we actually asked the fire department to comment on it, and they just want to have like a mountable curb. So it's we try not to create any like plant any vegetation that requires irrigation. So it's something that we wouldn't invest in water resources, and there are some materials out there that can actually provide some nice texture. So without further ado, we will. I have Ryan McLean here, and if he can walk through the design. Ryan, if you can be there. I wanted to show you also some. They brought some paths from the fire truck in the next slides for these. Those are the things that the slides that we presented to the fire department as well.
Okay, thanks, Aleida. Good evening, commissioners. Ryan McLean with Fair and Peers. So as Aleida mentioned, this was looking at breaking up the visual straight line that occurs on Santa Fe and looking at that as a traffic calming method. Another good feature of this is that it's the intersection of the Washington Boulevard bike lanes and the Santa Fe bike route. And always stops are not great for intersections of bike routes. The roundabout really facilitates the continuous flow of bicycles through those intersections and the turns on and off of them without the difficulty of coming to a complete stop and then getting going again. So that's another reason that this location was selected for that. We also looked at a smaller traffic circle type calming device that we're using on Dartmouth. But the intersection is actually a little bit too large for that, and you don't get the proper deflection to control speeds going through it, and putting the crosswalks along there. It just doesn't work at this size of an intersection. So that's why we went with this more full mini roundabout concept. And I'd be happy to talk about more of the features of roundabouts in general if that's something you're interested in. But otherwise, basically this could be various mountable materials, like Aleida said, to facilitate the various truck movements, fire truck movements. And then also you'll see that the crosswalks are pulled back from the intersection, as is done in a typical roundabout configuration, which really separates those the pedestrian vehicle conflicts from the vehicle conflicts. Another thing with the roundabout is bicycles go through it as a car. With the roundabout, vehicle speeds are lowered, physically lowered by the shape of the roundabout. So they're at about the same speed as the bicyclists going through it, and that's a better option than trying to fit a bike lane alongside where you've got vehicles entering and exiting and bikes trying to scoot along the side. So bikes would ride through this similar to how vehicles would drive it. And then again, you'll see all the curb extensions on all the approaches. That's to make sure that cars don't start to weave over and try and create a straight line through the intersection. For instance, when there's not parked cars there. So it creates a physical, it forces the cars to stay to the left and then slow down and come around to the right.
Questions?
Yeah. So would the stop signs be replaced with the roundabout at this location? So it would no longer be a four-way stop intersection? Is that correct?
Correct. It would be yield control at all approaches.
And so when you were measuring the 85th percentile for speed, does that imply that they were blowing through the stop sign and not rolling stop, or because on a four-way stop,
right.
I'm wondering where your measurement of speed is. If it's
we usually put the
or
meters in the middle of the block.
Right.
It's a long block. It's about 765 feet long, so there's enough room to accelerate after you make the stop. So, yeah.
Okay.
So this is also part of more treatment along Santa Fe. So in between Washington and Solano, we're adding edge stripes because the lanes, even with parked cars there, end up being 15 feet wide. So it's not wide enough to put in a bike lane, but it's wide enough that vehicles travel faster. So we're actually, in the ATP striping, proposing kind of a double stripe to almost create a buffer between the parking and the travel lane to just visually narrow that as well. And so again, this is kind of part of that in terms of visually breaking up the roadway.
So the signage would, instead of a stop sign, there would be a sign that says yield to traffic and circle? Or?
It's actually just a standard yield sign now, the triangular yield
Okay.
sign that goes at the dashed line there.
Okay. And that would be in all four entering directions? Okay.
What's the total width of Santa Fe in between Solano and Washington?
The total width is about 45 feet.
45, yeah, 45, yeah, that's right.
31. And you couldn't squeeze in bike lanes with 11-foot lanes or something like that? Isn't that possible? 7-foot parking or something?
I don't think that works.
No? 11-foot lane, 7-foot parking. I guess you're still short, are you?
2, 24. Yeah, you're still short. And that would be a 7-foot bike lane with a 5-foot, or a 7-foot parking lane with a 5-foot bike lane, which is pretty tight.
Right.
We do that elsewhere, but we'd still be a foot or so short on that.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, let's take public comment.
Did we want to talk about the bulb outs too first?
Oh,
Yeah, why not?
yeah, if you
Yeah.
want to speak about those, go ahead.
So we also looked at the intersection of Santa Fe and Solano and looked at how to also narrow these streets, reducing the pedestrian crossing distance, tightening the turns so that vehicles must travel slower, making rights on and off of Solano from Santa Fe. And so this is the concept we came up with. Basically, it puts bulb outs on the northwest and the southwest corners of the intersection. And those bulb outs are only going into Santa Fe. On the Solano side, there's a bus stop on the south side, so that's why there's the extra width there and don't want to bulb out into the bus stop. And on the north side, the lane's actually pretty narrow, so there's not sufficient space to shadow parking or something. There's no parking along that edge. And then on the east side, there's actually been some work done there recently. There's already new ADA curb ramps at 3 locations there. It's also already bulbed out into Solano there, shadowing the parking along the road there. And so that's why we weren't going to touch that side. Except for there's one curb ramp that doesn't meet ADA requirements, so that would be upgraded. The other advantages of adding these curb extensions are it does allow us to do curb ramps, directional curb ramps. So each crosswalk gets its own curb ramp, so 2 per corner, which is really what we're looking for now to meet ADA requirements. And again, reduces the crossing distance for pedestrians and visually narrows the street, as well as requires vehicles to travel slower around those corners.
Okay, questions from the commission about the bulb outs?
One question actually pertains to both parts. Do we have a cost estimate for either of these yet?
So actually, we ended up with 2 curb extensions at this intersection. So we're estimating around $50,000. There's inlets on the east side as well, so that was another reason not to do the curb extensions there, because this limits the amount of drainage work that would have to be done with those. The roundabout, depending on if the curb extensions from the side are full-on sidewalk reconstruction, pushing that out, it could be up in the neighborhood of $250,000.
Okay.
For this traffic circle, how many parking spots are lost in the?
I think we measured, it's about 1 parking spot per approach per side, if that makes sense. So each approach, as you approach it, you'd lose 1 parking stall on the left, or sorry, on the right, and then as you exit, you would also lose a stall there. There's already some red curb, I believe, along there, if it's not, there could be. So we tried to keep it within that as much as possible. And then we also stay clear of driveways. So no change to driveways.
All right, let's take public comment on this, on the roundabout and the bulb outs. Any relevant comments?
Good evening, Congress people. Before I start my clock, I want to thank you all for allowing the public to get involved here. I represent my neighborhood. I've been a Washington neighbor for some 40 years, and I have a little plaque here that was issued to me in 1979 saying that that four-way stop sign is mine. I stopped 850 cars and had them sign a little affidavit saying, I want a stop sign, and I got my stop sign because my son and I almost got, when he was a year old, we almost got hit by a car at that four-way intersection at Washington, Santa Fe, where that, you trying to take away my stop sign. The reason I don't like this thing, this is taking away probably 8 parking places. I have letters from my neighbors saying they don't like it. Have we tried putting a slow down sign on Santa Fe? Have we tried that? No. Do we know? Is there a slow down? Can we put one of those little lights that says your speed is? They're not going to slow down because of this roundabout. That's a 750-foot street, and they're going to taking nothing away from you. The price is outrageous. You know, you're spending $300,000 for this bulb out in the roundabout. And I think a stop sign or a slow down sign, or my kids are playing in their neighborhood, watch out for cats, or just something really simple. And I'm getting exasperated. It's just not worth it. My neighbors don't like it. I have letters from my neighbor across the street. Like I said, I'm the old man on the block now. I was a kid when I moved in here, and my kids are all grown up. My daughter can testify that those bulb outs are dangerous to bicycles. You'll hit one of those bulbs, you'll fall down in front of a car, you'll get run over. She had one, she lived on a house. Bye-bye. Thank you very much for being here. Take this under advisement because I don't want to lose my stop sign, and I don't really think it's going to do any good. And I'm just trying to speak for my neighbors who sent me here with the best intentions. And I'm a lifelong Berkeley. I was born at Berkeley General Hospital, and I do carry a little tiny bit of weight, but I'm a Weight Watcher, so. That's all I have to say about that. Thank you. Daughter?
Good evening, commissioners and residents. I'm Leonard's daughter, Elisa, and I grew up at this intersection pretty much. And so one thing that I will say in that another one of our neighbors said, our neighbor who lives at this intersection, and we live over here, or well, I grew up there, that it will beautify the neighborhood. So if you're looking to beautify our neighborhood, then absolutely put in a fountain, like the one at the Marin Circle, that would be nice. But if you're looking for safety, then I don't recommend a roundabout. I actually live a half a block away from the Calusa Circle now in Kensington, so I live close to my parents, which is great. My daughter goes to preschool at Memorial Park in Albany, and we go over to my parents' house just about every day. And the Calusa Circle, I don't know if you're familiar with driving there, but it's pretty much a nightmare. And I know it's a little bit more complex than this circle because there are actually 5 roads that lead into that circle. But for pedestrians, it's horrible because people who are coming and turning right and then, you know, proceeding around the circle, they're not aware of pedestrians who are crossing the road. So whenever I cross the road pushing a baby stroller, I'm halfway through the road when cars start going by, and then it backs up traffic behind them because they don't see you, they nearly hit you. I've had to scream at so many people, and they actually instituted a system where you have little orange flags now that pedestrians can take because it's so dangerous. The community organized that because nobody likes that circle there. And it's also dangerous for drivers. Not only have I nearly been hit many times as a driver, but I've almost hit other people as well. And I'm aware that it's a dangerous circle as I'm driving, so it's not my intention to speed through the circle. It's just the setup of it, I think, is inherently dangerous. And I also lived at the corner of Martin Luther King and Channing, where they have these little islands. And while I lived there, I must have been the first responder to 5 different accidents that involved bicyclists. And that's why I feel like any additional island or whatnot is just, it's so dangerous for bicyclists. And I want to make the neighborhood safe, and obviously beautiful would be nice as well, but I don't necessarily think that this is the best first step. And I would even be interested in studies that look at traffic safety around these roundabouts to see if it has improved or if it causes more accidents. I would like that to be part of this study, perhaps. And thank you very much for your time. I think it's great that you're pursuing and exploring how to make this safer. But I can also say that, I do live on Oakview, so right up from the Calusa Circle, and the circle doesn't slow down cars that are passing up Oakview. Cars by my house still speed by, even though they have to go through a circle, so I'm not really sure that how a circle there would slow down traffic going up to Solano. Okay, thank you very much.
Come on up.
Can you tell me your name, both of your names, please?
My name is Lisa.
Uh-huh.
And
Leonard.
Hi, my name is Rachel Cohen. I am a newer Albany resident, just moved in this summer, and I live on the 800 block of Santa Fe. Hello, neighbors. And I really appreciate the comments of folks who've lived here longer, because that's helpful to me. I would love something to calm the traffic on our block and to slow it down. I have 2 young kids, one who's at Marin Elementary. And it is true, down Santa Fe, people do come whizzing down and do build up speed, even though there's the stop sign there, which thank goodness there is, thank you. And, like backing out of your driveway in the morning during the rush time can be really stressful, actually, because people won't stop and people are going quite fast. And that's also the route that the Marin Elementary children take as their walking school bus. So there's huge numbers of pedestrian children on scooters, on bikes, on foot. So there's a lot of reasons to calm traffic on that block, not just for the residents who live there, but also for the local school kids who sort of use that as their thoroughfare to school. In terms of this proposal, I guess my big question that I'm not sure about is, if you took our stop signs out and put this in, would we end up with slower traffic or faster traffic? It's not clear to me that the roundabout would slow down the traffic. Like if we could all be confident that it really would slow everything down, that would be great, I think. But I do wonder if maybe a speed sign, slow down signs, or more enforcement possibly about speeding, if those things would be more helpful. So I don't know how helpful my comment is to you, except that I'm saying, yes, please slow it down, but let's make sure that we really are actually slowing it rather than just sort of visually breaking it up. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Go ahead.
We are Ted and Christine Kundachian. We live at 833 Santa Fe Avenue, right after the curve off of Solano, and it straightens out. And the people that come around off of Solano gun it, and they speed up right at that curve, and they keep going until they hit the stop sign. The stop sign makes them stop, and they still don't slow down on our part of the street. They gun it at that curve, and they go as fast as they can. So it's there that they need to slow down. They don't, the roundabout, I don't believe it would slow anything down. I think it would make them go faster. They would gun it and go out. I think losing the parking spaces would be very bad at that corner. I think it would be not a good thing at all. Now, I don't know about this other part coming off of Solano Avenue. that may be helpful to slow people down, but they are going to come around that curve and go straight for the stop sign. We wanted a speed bump closer to Solano Avenue, about where the curve is, to make them stop there, slow down just a little. It doesn't have to be a big one, just a little. Maybe a sign. I think a sign would be good there. Slow down just after that curve. That's the problem area, and they get going. If you can slow them down there, I think you'll be very successful. We are not in favor of this roundabout, not at all. Keep the stop signs, because they do stop. And I agree with the scary part about, parking places and the danger of it and everything. But it's up where we are, 833, right at that curve. Take care of that. I think you have a problem solved.
Well, Preston Jordan speaking for myself, and I'm not a neighbor of the intersection, but it's really interesting to hear the history.
Sorry.
That's okay, no worries. It's really interesting to hear the history in the area, and thanks for getting that stop sign put in. I ride through that intersection regularly, so I definitely appreciate it. And I'm not sure what to think of the circle proposal. Certainly the idea of not having to stop is interesting. I don't know if the types of people we're trying to attract to bike boulevards are necessarily the types of people that are going to be comfortable taking the lane going through a feature like this. So that's something to think about. Also, the way the crosswalks are set back, I think I understand the purpose for that, and I believe that's a design feature along with the bobots that would actually ameliorate a lot of what goes on at the Calusa Circle in terms of providing motorists space once they come out of the circle to reorient and pay attention to pedestrians, and also space for one vehicle to park there without backing up the circle. But on the other hand, I'm concerned that some people are not going to deviate as far out of their pathway as they have to deviate if they're continuing along the street to use those crosswalks, and instead they're just going to keep going straight. So I mean, there might be some treatment proposed to prevent that, but you're basically making sidewalk users have to take a longer path to navigate through this, which, is, I mean, if there was a huge safety benefit, maybe that's worthwhile if you can actually get 99% compliance with that. But otherwise, I think it's better to make motorists have to drive further than people who are using sidewalks have to walk further to get where they're going. So just some thoughts. Good luck with your deliberations.
Would anybody else like to speak on this issue?
So I have a general question. Is there any study results that firmly support that using the proposed traffic circle would slow down the traffic? I think the neighborhood asked the question, and that we have an answer for that.
So there's a lot of studies in terms of roundabouts slowing down traffic when it's as an option other than a traffic signal, or other than an option to go from a side street stop to an all-way stop. But replacing an all-way stop with a roundabout doesn't necessarily, there's not a direct correlation with slowing down the speeds from that. However, there is a phenomenon that happens with all-way stop control where people come to a complete stop in their car, and then because they came to a complete stop, feel like they need to accelerate faster and make up time in between there. So there is something to be said for traffic flowing more smoothly and giving the entire street a little, make it feel like it's a slower street.
Okay, any thoughts from the commission?
So, Aleda, if you can remind me, the 85th percentile speed that was measured here was 28?
29.
29, okay.
Yeah,
So it's technically not even up to the threshold for traffic calming, which is why a speed hump wasn't proposed.
yeah.
Okay.
And the other reason is the volume, almost 4,000 vehicles.
Correct. Right, so it's a collector roadway, essentially.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, part of the reason I ask, it seems to me that if we didn't warrant a speed hump that, cost $8,000 to $10,000, spending $300,000 instead doesn't seem rational. The roundabout treatment as a independent objective on bike boulevards to remove stop signs has merit conceptually. I think that as I look at it, all the design features are good design features. That pedestrians are deflected out of their path is kind of one of those unfortunate side effects, but you want the crosswalks back from the intersection, so a vehicle approaching the roundabout has to first look for the pedestrians, then once they pass the crosswalk, they can start looking for cars, because if you put the crosswalk at the intersection, they're looking for the cars that are going to hit them rather than the pedestrians they might hit. So design-wise, this is exactly the way you want to design a roundabout. It makes good sense. The partially raised islands and things like that are adding a lot of visual friction, and the idea that coming down the road, I'm seeing stuff in the road ahead of me, not just a stop sign that I'm used to, has the potential to slow people down. Further down the block, probably not so much, but it's a question of, are we changing sort of the driver's perception of what is this street, how should I be behaving on more of a voluntary basis rather than stop signs and even speed limit signs, which people kind of take as something that's being imposed upon them, even though they feel they could go faster. And that's where I think, as Ryan pointed out, people tend to feel like they're making up for lost time after the stop sign. So maybe in proximity to the intersection, we'll see more gradual acceleration, deceleration with something like this. I don't know that it would change much down the block again. Right. But I think it kind of comes back to the bigger question of what's our motivation here. If it's a traffic calming thing, either we should spend $8,000 or $10,000 on a speed hump, which isn't warranted, or $12,000 to $15,000 on a speed feedback sign, also not warranted, over the $300,000, well, $250 for the roundabout and the $50 at Solano. Again, not necessarily bad things, a little bit scary and maybe out of proportion to what the measured speeds were. So I guess that's, I hate to just categorically say no roundabouts, because I think roundabouts are kind of a good way to solve the problem, but if it's solving the wrong problem, maybe that's not the thing that we want to do here.
Yeah, I think most of the complaints that we're hearing are not about the behavior near the Washington intersection. Most of the complaints are about the behavior nearer to Solano, and it seems like this very expensive and beautiful project probably wouldn't have very much effect one way or the other on the place where the biggest problems are.
I have to say, I really like the design.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely has some benefits. It has some drawbacks too, but I agree. It's sort of not. It's solving a problem that we don't have, and not really addressing the problem that we do have, as far as I can tell.
Wasn't there an issue with doing a speed hump closer along the?
Yeah, I mean,
we propose a raised crosswalk, at least a set of 2 raised crosswalks, but. I don't remember who commented that that's not a traditional treatment, whereas now we're implementing one at Curtis and Sonoma.
Raised crosswalks at Washington?
One of those crosswalks to be raised, actually the 2 on Washington, on Santa Fe Avenue, going to be raised at the intersection. But then again, I mean, this is addressing the intersection, which is already stopped. And then we went through some discussion about that with the Safe as School project that we're going to implement in about a month or 2. It does have a raised crosswalk with the stop sign at Curtis and Sonoma.
But again, that any treatment that we do at the Washington intersection is going to have decreasing effect as you go farther and farther south and isn't. Let's discuss a little bit more.
It is
first,
another, I mean, can we want to put I mean, it would be more than one speed hump for that length.
So
Yeah, I mean,
you're saying instead of the circle,
And then we have
do
the slope,
two-
we have the slope in the.
The slope is on
There
the,
are two curves, horizontal and vertical,
Okay.
by the intersection of Solano. So that's visibility for the speed hump. We discussed that in length
I
here,
thought-
I think.
I thought we discussed that we couldn't do a speed hump
That's- that-
along the,
yes,
because of
Well,
incline.
yeah, I mean, we've talked about a number of reasons not to do speed humps. One is that the speed doesn't warrant it, but we could certainly override that and
The speed and the volume, they're two.
Well, we could ask the council to override the speed consideration, say this is a problem even though it's only 29. But the volume, is there a technical problem with putting in a speed bump when there's such high volume?
Yeah, well.
Just having more
it's-
impact.
Yeah,
Is it like damaging too many people's cars, or what is the issue with volume and speed?
Well, if you do something that causes discomfort for people with disabilities, then they're going to have to divert off of the collector onto a parallel residential street that's not a collector. So there's some traffic diversion effect, very minimal. Honestly, I think that if we were going to override that traffic calming is not warranted, going with something more visual, like a speed feedback sign, is more appropriate given the volumes on the street. So that's just kind of my thought.
So did I hear correctly, the speed feedback sign actually costs more than a speed hump?
a little bit more, but not, a little bit more, but less than.
But a lot less than this.
Do we need warrants for static signage?
Not really, no.
No, I mean, it seems like anything we want to do with painting the street and putting up plain passive signage, we should certainly do. I'm not sure that putting up signs asking people to slow down or warning about children or cats or anything like that is going to have any effect at all. Do we think that we can do anything with signage that would actually affect people's driving behavior?
At the beginning, maybe, but then after they get used to it.
We're already going to be doing the striping.
Yeah, but narrowing the
Narrowing
roadway, that'll
certainly
do it.
could make a difference.
Will help.
And putting speed stencils actually in the street is shown to reduce speeds as well.
Okay, well, that seems like the kind of thing we should be focusing on then. And maybe the speed sensor sign, if we can invest that amount of money in the problem rather than thinking about these hardscapes.
Yeah.
I do think that the Solano and Santa Fe treatment.
The bulb outs?
Yeah, I mean, I like this draw, I like the way this has been drawn. I remember us speaking about this. And it's not the same kind of price tag, but it treats,
Well, it fixes sort of an ADA
it fixes more of it
problem.
coming this way, not going
Yeah,
that
shorter
way.
crossing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really technically a different issue. It's still not a traffic calming thing, but it is improving the intersection.
Right.
It seems like something we should keep and look for an opportunity to get a grant and do it when the time is right, rather than thinking of it as an immediate solution to this problem.
I think the paint solution is a better one. Putting some speed legends on the street while we're out there striping seems like it's a good opportunity that we should take advantage of. As we've got some folks from the area, I'm curious if there's any comment on the experience with the bike lanes on Washington, which I don't drive this area that often, so I just went through there not that long ago. I was like, wow, this is kind of cool. And I would hope that it has noticeably changed driver behavior on Washington, at least some. I don't know if it has.
Can I just one more time?
Yeah, you can have another couple minutes.
Another bashful, to tell you the truth. We have, our Washington Santa Fe Street is 45 foot wide. I just went out and measured it tonight. The bike lane is 6 foot wide on both sides. There's 6 foot over there and 6 foot, and the car lane is 18 foot, and if your car is 8 foot wide or 7 foot wide, you got a foot on each side of you for cars going by, or on the bicycle lane, you got 2 foot on each side going by. So you got plenty of safe bicycle lane, which is going to cause the people driving cars to text and talk and get in that wreck that you see on TV, and maybe not. You know what I'm talking about. So anyway, what's my point? How about those little white speed bumps? Not the big speed bumps, the ones that get your attention when you run over them. They rattle you a little bit, saying you're going too fast. You know what I mean? No. You know what I mean?
I think
spot
you
starts.
won't want them. Yeah, spot starts. You won't want them when you're trying to sleep at night.
Well, you know.
Not saying that we couldn't do it. If the
Well,
neighborhood,
the people that are having the problem at 833 Santa Fe, they want to slow down that traffic, and the little girl that's backing out of her driveway want you to slow down and be aware. And if you're going to be aware, be aware. It's going to wake you up. Let's wake up.
But it's going to wake you up all night, even when you're not driving.
I'm the neighbor. Hey,
Yeah, okay.
wake up. Wake up, City Council. Come on.
Okay. I had one other question related to this that came up in the email. Somebody was requesting painting of individual parking spaces along the curb. Has that discussion been completed? Because I didn't really see an answer
No,
from
we
you about
usually
that.
don't like to do it unless there's a problem exactly like the email said. If there's bad management of parking spaces on the street, they usually take parking spaces because a lot of cars are smaller than the 20 or 22 feet that we're going to paint there. So it's going to be a waste of space. That's one option. The other option is that, okay, if you have a car that is maybe 15 to 18 foot long, then you will have parking. You will have to park within the marks. You can be cited if you're not parked within the marks. But if there are a lot of cars that are smaller than that, then it's going to be a waste of space.
It's also a maintenance issue that as they fade, it's just kind of one more thing that we have to try to keep up with. So we will do them when there's a specific problem, but we try not to do them citywide.
Okay, so is that something that we need to discuss as the council, or is that something that the individual resident would just discuss with you?
We usually just take care of that.
Okay.
So right now, we're thinking that a speed sign, what's the word? The
Speed feedback
sign, no raised crosswalks, but painting along the edge of the lanes.
And a speed limit stencil in the roadway.
Yeah.
A lot different than this.
The speed
It
feedback.
seemed like there was more to this, why we got to this point. But
Well, the records show that we discussed the visual line, that there was going to be
Right.
intersection of two bicycle facilities.
right, it had to do with the bikes.
But a four-way stop sign works acceptably for a bike intersection. It may not be the ideal thing for all purposes, but I don't think it's a problem.
And if I could just add one thing, I think it also started as just the traffic circle like we're doing on Dartmouth. And the idea was that you couldn't just do that here. And so what would it take to do something like that here? And so
Yeah,
now
that's
you
right.
see.
Now this is what it would
Okay.
take.
Yes.
the logical outcome from that.
Okay, do we have one more short public comment? Please come up to the mic.
I wasn't in on all the conversations you've had, obviously. So what would, I guess you eliminated the possibility of a speed bump up on the road on Santa Fe closer to Solano Avenue to prevent them from just gunning it and running down the street until they stop at the stop sign. I've seen some speed bumps, though, that are very gentle, and they have white lines on them. Now, I don't know if that's what you're talking about, but a gentle speed bump that won't frustrate drivers, because a lot of people do go by there in the evenings, they commute past there. Couldn't that be put in? Not the kind you've got in front of the Marin School. Those are too heavy. But a real gentle one with white stripes. Just put that near that curve where they start to speed up, or just a little past the curve. I think that would do it. I don't think the flashing sign that tells you you're going 25, 26, I don't think that's very nice on those roads, but the gentle speed bump with white stripes would get their attention.
Is there a range of speed bumps that we could
No,
consider?
it should be the same cross-section. The problem that I've been telling you is that one side of that speed hump is 5 inches height with respect to the pavement, and the other side is what it should be, 3.5 inches. So
Because of the slope, you mean?
On Santa Fe, yeah, we only used one cross-section here. And after the lesson we learned on Santa Fe, we are trying to develop some some speed humps on slopes.
Yeah.
So we don't have that kind of.
Okay, but if we wanted to consider a speed hump here that would be less high overall than other speed bumps.
No, it would be the same cross-sections, 3 point.
Is there a possibility of making a lower speed hump than that?
Then it's not a speed hump. 3.5 inches is a very, with 6 feet of distance to approach those 3.5 inches, then I think it's very smooth. That's what we're trying to implement here. We get speeds of 18 to 20 miles per hour over it. I mean, you want to add something? We can make them low.
I mean, those speed humps are designed for 15 to 20 miles per hour. So as you bring that up towards 25 miles per hour, then that's just it's gonna be effective for that one point, but you're gonna be right back up with that speed after that. I also think it's good to do a consistent treatment, at least through a city, because then it sets people's expectations for when they come up to a speed bump, how fast they can go over that.
See, that was the reason to have a standard in the traffic calming policy.
Okay. You need any more feedback from us?
No, I think it's fine. We have some options right now. We can put the stencil on 25 miles per hour. We can leave the bulb outs at Solano and Santa Fe for a future project within maybe in the CIP, in the next CIP, or a grant, and we'll see how the implementation of the speed of the markings on the pavement markings, perhaps a couple of signs that says 25 miles per hour as well. The other important thing to leave is the striping next to the bicycle, next to the parking lane. That will narrow the street. Maybe we can extend it all the way to that to the other intersection.
Okay. All right, let's have Ken return and can move on to item 6E, sidewalk and traffic calming proposal for the east side of the 800 block of Masonic Avenue.
Oh, I have to. For Saturday. So, sorry, I have to really shift my. So we do have, this is, and I apologize that, I think we mentioned at the last meeting that we were going to.
Can I ask people to move into the hallway, please? Thank you.
That we were going to, that we commissioned the design of a sidewalk in front of the senior center, like across the street on the west side of Ohlone Greenway. We do have we do have plans here that it says 95% plans, but they're going to be subject to comments at this commission and also at the Park and Rec Commission in October 10th, I think it is. So this is but we're here to receive comments, and what we have here, and let me see if I can turn off the light a little bit so we can see better, because the colors actually do not show very well here, and then also on the printout.
No.
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 Oh.
Well, maybe this is it. Thank you.
It must be our video operator.
Well, let's see if we can do this. I mean, you guys are okay with that?
Yeah.
So what we do have is the sidewalk. My goodness, I have to. This is the senior center. This is the okay, this is Ohlone Green, Masonic Avenue, sorry, from Washington Avenue to Solano Avenue. And the sidewalk would start from Solano Avenue, north of the crosswalk, all the way to the area where the existing pedestrian path meets the, to meet the existing pedestrian path. And then continue here all the way to Washington. So we're going to respect the trees. There's some trees, a couple of trees here that we think might not be impacted, but we'll see how the root system is. They're young trees, so we hope that this can be a little bit like relocated to maybe 4 or 5 feet if it's the case. But what we're providing here is also from this area on, we're providing marked parking spaces because we want to make sure that we provide access for people getting out of the car on the side of the sidewalk. So that's basically the project here. We also are going to include the speed humps that what's going on? The speed humps that are proposed for Masonic, and that's going to be in front of 820, and also there's going to be a raised crosswalk in front of the senior center. So in addition to that, the project includes what am I doing? I want to go to show there is, I don't know if you remember that there were some stairs between the street, between the crosswalk and the Ohlone Greenway, the actual path. The stairs were eliminated with the retrofitting project that Bart conducted a couple of years ago. And right now they're going to be, this project includes a ramp that will connect the area where the tables are located right now to the raised crosswalk. So, yeah, let's show you. Yeah. So that is basically the project. We only have money for design right now. It is included in the CIP, and there is some measure W, I think, is the money that they have for some of these of the construction cost of the project, and so maybe a miscellaneous transportation project that we can pitch in to provide for the raised crosswalk and the speed hump on the 800 block of Solano. So I'm sorry, I was the guy. Thank you. So with that, well, I would like to hear your comments. I do have some comments on those plans. It's the first time I've seen them too, but I haven't sent them back to the designer. I just want to hear your comments, and I apologize that I thought that I had put them on, and I just put them on today. So I completely overlooked that. So.
Okay, questions from the commission?
What's the cost?
For the estimated cost is about 100. What is the cost? It's about $150,000 for the construction with the raised crosswalk and the signage and everything and the ramp. The design is being paid with existing funds, Measure B or BB, something like that.
So that includes the sidewalk down the whole block?
Well, I'm going to,
Yeah.
looking at our our new capital improvement budget, program budget, it's a total of $358,000. That includes the construction.
Construction management.
Construction management, so it's professional services and construction. And that does run for the entire block from Solano to Washington.
Yeah.
And it's funded primarily out of city funds, but there is some Measure B and Measure BB funds as well.
Thanks.
Public comment?
So I'm sorry, I'm just looking at these for the first time and having a
Yeah,
little.
and I said I apologize.
Oh, okay, yeah.
You should have, somebody should have emailed me saying that it's not there. I mean, it's just like, oh.
And I think it's a little hard to read, I guess, because I'm over 50.
Yeah.
But I think it says 4.5 foot wide sidewalk in some places at least, and then 5 foot wide other place. I mean, Strollers and Rollers' preference is that sidewalks be 5 feet wide. And
Right.
would like that to be a standard. I don't know why it's 4.5 here, but.
Part of it is the trees that are planted there, and we don't want to impact them. Are you talking about the area of, let's see where?
Oh, I see. So because of the existing trees, if you went to 5 feet, then it would go and get into their root zone even more.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. I mean, it's kind of tricky because it has a retaining curb along it, so it's even, in terms of its width, it's even more restricted than most sidewalks where people can kind of step out of the way.
We need the retaining wall because there is the slope.
No, I understand that. I'm saying on a regular sidewalk, people can step out of the way on the
Yeah.
lawn or whatever. I mean, sort of improvise, but not gonna be able to improvise here. But on the other hand, I guess it's not gonna have a lot of two-way traffic. 'Cause it's not really a through route so much. I mean, it is, but it's more for people who are parking. So, yeah, probably not a big deal.
What I've seen there is that a lot of, particularly seniors, actually just get out of the parking lane on the street.
Right.
And then there's no sidewalk right now, and there's a tripping hazard
Yeah.
on the side of the
Well, yeah, I mean,
passenger.
this would be a huge improvement,
Yeah.
clearly, yeah. All right, thanks.
These are all trees.
How high would the retaining wall be? How high will the retaining wall be?
high?
Yeah.
It's about 1.5. It's very, very, it's not
Okay.
a tall one.
Oh, okay.
1.5, that's the max.
Fun for.
6 inches.
Yeah. Fun for skateboarders.
Oh,
Fun for
we're going to
skateboarders.
have treatment on top
will?
of it.
Okay.
So it will discourage skateboarders. Yeah, that's the first thing. Thing.
Perfect height.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it would be great.
Any other thoughts?
So wouldn't the sidewalk would reduce the green space?
Yeah, but it's needed. In this case, we need to have it, particularly in this block.
I think making the street safer for the seniors who use the senior center is really important. I know, for example, their major weekly gathering is a Wednesday lunch, and at least once a month, half the street is closed on Wednesday for street sweeping. And it's the side of the block along the senior center. So once a month, this sidewalk could get a lot of use, if at no other time.
It seems like.
Already better than it used to be. Remember taking my kids to the preschool and take them out of the car and put them on the retaining wall and have them walk down to the stairs, which aren't there. So, but sidewalk would be much better.
Okay.
So I think what we'll do is finalize the design, bring it back to you for a recommendation that would then go to city council and project implementation. And it's something that we've programmed for the 2016, 2017 fiscal year. So it's a high priority for both us and for the recreation department as the people who run the senior center.
Nobody on the dais mentioned the 5-foot sidewalk. I'm certainly in support of having the sidewalk 5 feet in width. I see some nodding.
Wherever possible, yeah.
Yeah, can you?
So, or were all those round things trees? I mean, isn't there another design where we're going ahead and going
Is
with
the
the
neck down?
5 foot and then having the cutouts for the trees, or
Yeah,
would that
so.
be one way to do it?
Right, so, yeah, that's what we're trying to see. There are 3 trees that are really valuable for the community, and we
Right.
don't want to we don't want to kill them.
No, but if we can do those workaround, where is that?
Yeah, we will
On
work around
Marin
them.
somewhere. We're doing that.
On Marin, are you thinking of the cutout sidewalks or the cutout sidewalks with the iron grates over them?
Maybe that's what I'm thinking about.
There's some of those on Solano.
Yeah. I mean, so basically, I'm in favor of 5-foot sidewalks, using creativity to save the trees.
Right. Yeah, those trees are higher in relation to where the sidewalk will be. So they're not at the same level.
We'll do our
But
best to widen the sidewalk.
Okay.
as
We'll
much
do
as
our
we can.
best, whatever
There's no
is-
reason not to.
Yeah,
Other
and
than where we just have to stay out of the way of the
It's very, yeah.
health of the
We have some limitations.
Okay.
Okay, I think we should have a motion to continue to 10:30. We have 2 more items to cover.
So moved.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Item 6F, update on standard construction detail. It's made for really exciting reading in the middle of the night.
Good evening. Sorry. So I prepared a very short slides for the updated City Albany standard details. So, yeah. So overview, the current standard details were issued in 2009, and it is one of the most widely used documents in city's public works. And it provides guidance for public infrastructure design, construction, inspection, and maintenance. And it covers improvements on sanitary sewer, streets, and drainage works. And why we want to update? One, after review, engineer review, we found out some errors in the standard, and there are some inconsistency. And the last version, or the existing version, is a combination of kind of like a direct copy from several resources like Alameda County, Contra Costa County, and other city. They don't even change the logo or anything. And some of this, they come from like the 1980s or 1990s. And those standards, they cited other reference, and nowadays they're out of date. And so that creates some inconsistency. And sometimes we got a call from contractor which one to use, and then they present that conflict to us, and it gives some difficulty for us to interpret our city standards. And also, this also creates some in compliance with current federal and state regulations, especially like some of these ADA requirements, and you will not find that in this current existing city standard. And the last thing is we have some new practice in the city's public works infrastructure. For example, I'm just taking an example. Right now, the EPA find EB mud and for the infiltration of the sewer, and that is a consent decree. And as we all know, that the standard the manhole cover, they have the hole on the cover and it go through, and the new standard actually does not allow the cover go through. It only have the hole for you to pry it up, but it will not go through the manhole to allow the runoff to come into the hole. So those are the new things that we catch and put into the new standard. Okay. So the updated standard details, it covers 22 details for streets, basically cover curb ramps, driveway, sidewalk, trenches, valley gutter, and monuments, and other things. For sewer, we propose 15 details, including manholes, laterals, utility protections, and the drainage. We focus on the inlet, especially because city of Albany, we have a lot of inlets along the bikeway, and we installed a lot of inlets that they have the bar wide enough to trip the bicyclist into the cover, and brought attention to us. So in our new standard, we particularly focus on that. And also there are several locations that those inlet cover, they are not actually heavy duty, and it's damaged by trucks and other things. So like erosion protection, those are current days for stormwater management, and we incorporate as much as we can. So those are the overview of the standard details, but we have to give some disclaimer here is that this standard detail, the set of the standard detail, has never been intended to cover all the standards needed, and still it is under the federal, state regulation, and if there is anything that not covered, and then we would all rely on the federal and state regulations. And also we consider this as a live document. As more experience and more practice in the future, we expand to modify or to update this in the future. With that, I leave it to the commissioners.
Questions? Comment? Public comment?
Wondering if while I comment, staff could bring up the intersection on Street View of Portland and Talbot, please. So I thank staff for bringing this forward and providing the explanation. I think there's 8 or 9 curb ramp details that are shown in this document, but none of them match the curb ramps that are among the most common in the city, which is a KC modified ramp for going around a corner. So if you look at, I don't know, it's like 9.8 or 9.9 in there, it has a KCM, which is KC modified, but the sidewalk is only on one side of the corner, it's not on the other side. And so that doesn't match. I don't know if you can go down to Street View on this. But if you look at, yeah, it's hard to see because it's washed out, but if you look at that corner, it's ramping down because the landscape strips are so narrow. The sidewalk has to ramp down to the corner because there isn't enough room to actually have just the ramp at the corner. And so there's a retaining curb there, and there's no standard detail for that in this document. And that's, I mean, I've seen probably 20 of these put in around Albany in the last 5 years. So it seems like, as this is one of the most common ramps in Albany, there should be a standard detail. And that would also be very helpful because these ramps were not built to the standard. The retaining curb's actually in the sidewalk instead of back of the sidewalk, so it creates a tripping hazard. It comes to a 90-degree corner, which creates a tripping hazard rather than being rounded. So I think there's just multiple arguments for actually having this as a standard detail in the document. And then on top of that, a couple other things. It has the minimum on one of the standards is for a sidewalk is 4-foot width. I think it'd be nice to have a note that 5 foot is preferred in all possible cases. It would also be nice to have a note, I think it's note 10, regarding the detectable warning surfaces related to the curb ramps. There's been a discussion on the strollers and rollers list over the last few weeks about the hazard of the detectable warning surfaces that are currently used in Albany, and they're widely used in cities in the area, that they're actually a slip hazard. So people have been reporting that as they both walk and bike over them, that they've fallen or they've slipped. One person broke their wrist. And so the friction coefficient on the material that's currently being used is just way too low. So it'd be nice if there was a note about, something. Unfortunately, the state didn't adopt. The only thing that's in the standard, to my knowledge, based on the experts I've talked to, is that they're supposed to be slip resistant, but there's no quantitative definition of what that is. There's a draft standard, quantitative standard, but it was never adopted. So, but it should be better than what's out there now. Thanks. And there are other materials out there that are an option.
Okay. Can I respond to some of the comments?
Yes, please.
Okay. First of all, thank you, President, for the comments. And I just want to, to address some of your comments. Actually, for example, like the roundabout at the back of the modified KC, and we already built that into our standard. Actually, the version that we have modified, we specified the radius would be 2 foot for the round, to make it a round at the back for the modified C, and for the detectable warning surface, and I received your email, and I will look into the manufacturing specs, and it is really hard to specify, say, what is the fraction that you want to use. So that may be some tricky things that we need more research on that. But definitely, I want to take a look and see if it is warranted to put that specify the material in the standard details. But usually we tend not to do so. We would rather to do that in the general note when we do the construction. So if that's the case, because otherwise, if you put things too restrictive, some people may fall down because the fraction is too high. That could possibly, because sometimes when they move, they expect they move fast, but it's all about managing your expectations. If they think that they can move fast while the friction is very high, that actually your momentum is going forward, but your actual friction is high, and then you fall down too. So you would have the same report regardless of what you put there, but we're researching that. And regarding the width of the sidewalk, I prefer, of course, as wide as I can, and 5 foot is more comfortable. I agree, but we do have a sidewalk GIS database, and I took a look, and we did have a certain area that less than 5 feet, and sometimes it is kind of like how do we want to allocate the space for each of the key components: the sidewalk, pavement, bicycle lane, and other components, and the turning radius for the curb and the bob out. And if of course we prefer 5 feet, but I don't want to make it as a guiding, say, the guidance put in the standard to say at any time you put the sidewalk width, keep at 5 feet as top selection, top priority, to sacrifice other things. So I think it would be a comprehensive evaluation, especially at some area that they have very restrictive area space, and then we really need some evaluation. So that's why we put 4 feet as kind of like to cover as a baseline, as a minimum. So we can in our construction, during future construction, we can advise for 5 feet for design, but for standard details, I think we just want to keep it as general and the minimal requirements as much as we can. So I hope that answers some of your questions.
So do you think a notation in the standard that says 4 foot minimum, 5 foot preferred when practical I mean, can something like that go in the standard, or does that rub you the wrong way as a standard specification? Because I mean, I agree, we don't want to say absolutely must be 5 feet to meet the standard, but
We can implement that in our design, you know, because the standard itself, as I said, it covers your, sometimes it functions as a things that we do not produce the details, but just attach it to, as an amendment to your design, and for people to do the construction or to do maintenance. So it doesn't really dictate the design. And if somebody we just look at the last project talking about the sidewalk on the Masonic, and we can put the construction details of the sidewalk attached to the design, but the design, the weight of the design would not be dictated by the standard details. So I would say it doesn't really matter.
So I think what you're saying is that this document is meant to fill in certain kinds of details that are not specified in each design, and the sidewalk width is always specified in each design.
That's absolutely right.
So it doesn't matter what the standard says in that case.
Right.
We wouldn't reduce the width of a sidewalk just because.
I mean, I know nobody would purposely reduce it. I'm concerned about things being forgotten, falling through the cracks, so to speak. They're
over time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The institutional memory of having it written down somewhere that this is our preference.
Yeah, it seems like a standard would hold the preference with some wiggle room. Exactly the minimum, but like we prefer it to be 5 feet every time you could.
Sure.
With the minimum being 4, 5 feet or more. It seems like that's where you would capture that information is in a standard, but it sounds like that makes it more garbled for you to execute or something.
It is because we wanted to make this standard as a general guidance to cover the most case in the city. As I mentioned in the city's sidewalk database, we have the sidewalk less than 3 feet. And also we have multiple lengths of 3.5 feet and 4 feet.
So why would the standard mention width at all?
That is for the future sidewalk construction that we would like to make it full.
So we would actually like to make it 5.
That's even more why we would like it to say 5. That's even more the reason.
If I could help, I think sometimes when we go through the planning and design process, we don't start, this is kind of the last document we might pick up. We kind of conceptually design and use more of planning guidelines, of which there are a lot of different books and references and experiences that we have. And I think, at least for the way I tend to use the standard specs or a building code book or something like that, is after we've got the conceptual level plan, we come to this and to make sure we're not missing any of the details. So the 4-foot minimum is really good just to make sure that we're checking that. I suppose we could put in 5 feet, but by the time we're using this, we're probably already pretty well into the design, in design process. It's not really, this isn't a design guideline, it's more of it's a technical checklist at the end.
Yeah.
So you don't have a design guideline, or do you? I mean, because I guess that does seem to come up in here.
AASHTO has them, ACTO has them, there are other cities that do these things that we turn to.
But we don't have one for the city of Albany.
Not
in the way that we have this document that you've put together.
Well, if you publish it, then designers can readily access it and use it to inform their design at the outset. I think if you want to have a preferred standard and then a reduced standard, another way to do it is to set the preferred standard and say, this is the standard unless otherwise approved by the Public Works Director. So then there has to be an affirmative effort to say, here's a reason why we can't meet the standard and get permission. I don't think it has to be a big process, but just something that makes it easy. Because if you say we prefer 5 feet, but we'll go as low as 4, that's not really giving anyone any guidance on, well, it's cheaper for me to do 4 feet, so never mind the 5 feet.
Can we put minimum 5 feet and,
Not a minimum. You can. I think I like the way you put it there is, prefer 5 feet. And if it's less than that, it has to be approved by the city engineer.
Yeah.
I think we can do that because we have other standard that with a note like that.
Yeah, because I think that will put it in writing so that it doesn't get forgotten later.
Okay.
So we spent a lot of time talking about this one issue. Preston brought up several others. Do you feel that when
I actually want to follow up on one of those.
Okay.
On one of the first things you said about Preston was making the point about the corner sidewalk detail where the ramp is actually at the corner. And I was looking through the example. You mentioned that there was a reference to the rear radius. I'm having trouble finding that.
Okay. So the one that we look at that are all those with...
Which page?
So
9.6.
Let's see, look at page C.
Is that what you're
No. Yeah, actually, if you look at the 9.5, 9.6, and and also 9.7, it's everywhere that if we see the constraints of the space and there's turning radius, there's a corner related to the curb ramp, and we all put the round corner with a turning radius of 2 feet for the curb ramp.
I'm not seeing what he's talking about. Is that the curb corner or the back corner along the landscaping?
I think for the example that we showed here, it's more like at the corner of the front line to the curb. And the one that Preston particularly point out, it doesn't show it here. And but I think 9.5 is the closest one that we can say is close to that. And our case C here is not a modified case C, so it's different from the one that I presented here. So we didn't, you see that if you look at the page 9.3, we do not really have a back corner to show the back, the constraint on the back. So there's no round corner there because there's no round corner just in this case. So I would say all the curb ramps, these are the standard cases, and the designer are allowed to change the design and propose the curb ramp that they come out based on space, based on the topo, but they have to comply with ADA requirements. That is the basic requirements for the landing area and also for the detectable for the ramp area. And if they satisfy those requirements, on top of that, and then we can what we can do is I can add the round corner in the note to be applied to all the cases. I think that would be the solution.
So what would the note say?
No, right now we do not have a note to specify that, but I can consider add one note to the note section, which is page 9.10.
9.10.
Yeah, 9.10. We can add one note to that, saying all the corners should be rounded with a radius of 2 feet of radius. I think I have no problem to add that.
Inside corner.
Yeah.
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 That sounds reasonably satisfactory. It has a little less impact when it's not its own graphic.
Mm-hmm. On the graphic, as I said, the cases that we present are standard cases. It's not modified cases. So we do not run into a condition that you have a back corner and then you have the round corner here to show. As I said, the closest example to show here is 9.5 that we do have. You do see the round corner. We involve with any vertical curve. And also 9.6 show the same thing.
Yeah, I'm not sure we're talking about the same thing.
I know it's not exactly the same, but the concept is the same. That means if you involve any, basically the curb ramp we're talking about at least is one surface. But if you have a retaining wall or any curb, you are changing the surface. And when you change the surface, and if there is any corner like that, we would like to introduce to make it as a round instead of a rectangular. I can specify that in the note session.
Okay.
Yep.
Before I let off on this discussion and move on, I find that the notations about the, let's see, I'm looking at 9.3. So it says retaining curb if necessary at edge of sidewalk. I find that a little unclear. I think somebody could logically assume that it's on the inside edge, so that it takes up part of the sidewalk. I'd love it if it were more clear that that was outside the edge.
Outside the edge, okay.
In theory, as long as it's got the minimum landing area, doesn't matter in the specs. But we're saying we prefer it to be outside the back of the rest of the sidewalk.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I would like to see.
Yeah.
Okay, we can add that. We can specify. Yep.
That would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Preston, you want to say something more?
I think the reason it's important it's outside the edge is because I've been walking with people at this ramp and they've tripped on this.
No, I don't disagree with you at all, Preston. I think that's why we want that standard. If we look at what the typical standards are, all they care about in the standard is how big is the landing. I think what you've raised is an issue beyond that, which we would like to codify in our standards.
Well, the case C actually shows, the drawing shows it outside of the sidewalk width. So, but I mean, having the language there would be, I still don't understand the resistance to having a drawing of this situation. So the case CM, which I think is 9.8 or 9.9, that is not a standard, that's not one of the standard ramp designs on Caltrans drawing A88A. So the city does have ramp designs in its standards here that are not Caltrans standard designs. So I really don't understand. I mean, that particular standard is not a ramp that really occurs hardly anywhere in Albany, but this occurs everywhere. So that, I think that drawing could easily be modified to actually show the sidewalk go around the corner, show the retaining curb at the back side of the sidewalk, show that the radius should be 2 feet. I mean, it should just be drawn. I mean, these are getting installed all over the city. I just don't understand what the resistance is to actually having a drawing of something that is being installed all over the city and it's being misinstalled in some places because there isn't such a drawing anywhere. Thank you.
There is no, the reason that why this is not a standard drawing here is that we presented all the cases for the curb ramp. And as we just mentioned, we agree this is a case C, modified. And if you modified, which means you can modify to any shape that you want. And this one, you can find this shape, and you may find some difference from here to another one. Even the outside shape look similar, but the specification for that case would be different. And I think if any modified case C is proposed, usually they would come up with a design, and the designer would actually draw the curb ramp design for construction rather than directly use the standard details.
Well, it sounds like Preston is saying that there's a thing that's happening in a lot of places that looks the same in every place, and you're saying that no, it's actually different in every place. It
is not really produced from one case that they can use this as a book and then do the construction. It is all come from the design and then for construction. So this one is in a case that you do not need a design and you use the standard details and then for construction.
So where it's been done wrong, is it because it was written wrong in the design for that project, or is it because it was omitted from the design for that project?
I don't think there's anything wrong here. It is just that a corner is not rounded.
Where it's done in the undesirable way.
Right, it's not a desirable way. We can modify that in the future, but I don't really think that there's wrong here.
Is it possible to draw it? I mean, we have a lot of them in town. Is it possible to draw it and to have the details saying that it's going to be rounded 2 feet? Can we do that?
I think we already put 2 feet for the rounding.
But we want to have I mean, there are about 11 of those ramps that I remember we built, or maybe more than that.
As I mentioned, this one, all these are through design, not really through the standard.
Can we put it as a modified? Because, as I said, I mean, in Cerrito, I've seen there's two types. This type with the corner at 90 degrees, and also with the rounded.
Well, the opposite corner from this one is rounded.
So, I mean.
Well, it's interesting to me. I mean, if I recall correctly, when we've been in these projects that have corners, we've often been told that there isn't a detail for the corner because that's a field decision.
Right. I mean, if you look at the Caltrans standards that Preston mentioned, they're kind of oddly done. There's quite a few alternatives for how you'd put a ramp in the middle of a straight curb. And then there's just two simple drawings of, oh yeah, and if you're at a corner, by the way, you can do one diagonal or two directional. And then there's some cross-section drawings. So it really is kind of a hodgepodge that you have to pick pieces and assemble them. So in that regard, yes, it's a design question, and you're kind of drawing from fragmentary standards. When you first look at it, it's like, oh, look, we got lots of stuff to draw from, but hardly any of them actually are applicable in the field. And so it's going to take some engineering design. But I think knowing that we have a lot of corners that look like this, we can say, here's what the standard layout at a corner would be with one ramp or two ramps. One ramp, since we have a lot of very tight radius corners. And yeah, if it's got to have a retaining curb in the back, we want it behind, and we'd like it curved instead of coming to a point. I think it's easy enough to draw that. We may say that the dimensions are not all absolute, because obviously, you're going to have different size, distance from the curb, to the back of sidewalk and all that. But the general configuration is a simple one. We can do a non-dimensioned drawing that says, look, the retaining curb is behind the sidewalk, and this is how you ramp down. And then you figure out, now you go to the standards and say, here's the maximum slope and all these things that come into it. And it does become a design problem, but with good guidance. I feel like we're not that far off.
I know.
There were a number of specific issues that you, Preston, brought up originally. This curb ramp design was one, and the sidewalk width was another. Are there any that we have not talked to death yet that you'd like to bring our attention to again? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think it may be a design issue, but I'll research that more into that.
Okay. I think I haven't looked into the warning surfaces, and it's worth checking on. It may be that some of the better ones are not yellow, but the last I checked, yellow was not a requirement. Is that still true?
No, I think I think the latest. These things evolve every year or two. I think the latest is that it does need to be yellow or some other contrasting color.
Right.
And which is for concrete is.
Yeah, the degree of contrast. Yeah.
I was told also that the Center for the Blind had specifically requested the yellow.
Okay.
Yeah,
Well,
that's pretty standard.
Right.
So I'm not surprised.
And it sounds like we're all in agreement about the goal for that. We just don't have the information we need, so it'll be a future update. But the ones where we just need to come to agreement, I hope we've settled it enough that.
Yeah, for the detail. I mean, hopefully we can, just do a non-dimensioned drawing to go along with the rest of the specs, or the standards, sorry.
What case do you want to call?
I
This is
think.
not a modified case C, or we can call it modified case C.
It's case C turned into a corner.
To corner, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So just round case C and that's it.
I think we understand the comment, and if you want to make a motion to direct us to work on this, that's.
Do you need
we'll
a
do our
motion,
best.
or?
Yeah, we'll do our
Well, we
best.
would like to be able to take this to the city council. We do need the council ultimately to direct, to adopt these.
So I'll make a motion that with the addition of a modified case C corner ramp, we would approve council adopting the construction details.
And the 5 foot.
And the 5
And the 5 foot sidewalk width standard, unless otherwise approved by the city engineer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Do people have the stamina to talk about electric vehicles tonight, or?
We don't have to. We do have some announcements that if you really want to get out of here at 10:30, maybe we'll just touch on the announcements.
A
and
lot
bring
of
back
announcements.
The electric vehicles.
I mean, does anyone feel any urgency about the electric vehicle issue, or?
Well, I think the urgency is that I think the Sustainability Committee has been tasked with developing an ordinance, and then what we're trying to do is that I was going to just jump to the summary table where the cities, other cities and counties have the criteria, and I'm sorry, the criteria to.
I'm going to suggest we not. This is just
Not even
checking
enter it,
because it's not something the Sustainability Committee is going to take up in the next couple of months.
Okay, then let's move
So
on to.
we'll prioritize that for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, let's do announcements and communications.
Do you want to, lady? You can do the first one. That you've asked us to let you know when we hear from citizens about different things, and at the intersection of Posen, I guess I'm on a roll. Yeah. At the intersection of Posen and Ordway, we've received a request, which is a large and a wide intersection, a request to install some crosswalks, and we want to bring this to you at a future meeting to explore the options there, and we'll do a public notice and everything associated with that. The item 2, we wanted to just let you know that we've heard the direction about modifying the ATP plans a little bit to incorporate the bicycle boulevard, and there will be a cost to modifying the design. I think it was about $4,000. That's just kind of part of the cost of making these kinds of changes, but we're going to go ahead and do that with, I believe that's Fair and Piers. That's Ryan who's working on that at Fair and Piers for us. With respect to the capital improvement plan, we have now a capital improvement plan that is up to date, and it was presented to the city council the other night. I guess it was Monday night, and will be going for information and discussion. It will be going back to the city council probably on their consent calendar agenda at their next meeting for formal adoption. It's not a glamorous document, but we're really proud of it because it's the first time in a number of years that we've really been able to get our arms around all the different projects that we have, including the things you're interested in, plus fire engines and computers and all sorts of other stuff, and incorporate that into a single document with all the different funds that we use. And now it's more of a useful tool to kind of strategically plan what we're working on. It's a little overwhelming, and Wynn has done a really great job at developing a project schedule for a lot of projects we have for the next couple of years, over $20 million worth of capital improvement projects, which is hard to imagine that we're going to be able to implement those, but we're going to do our best. That's a big chunk of projects for a small town.
How long is the cycle? How long is the cycle for the?
It's a 5-year plan. The total plan is $31 million over 5 years, but 21 is in the next 2 years. And we'll actually be updating this, even though it's a 5-year planning horizon. We'll update it every year or two.
Annually.
So I encourage you to take a look at it, and at a future meeting, we could go through it in detail if you wanted to. But it's really, like I said, we're proud of the work that we did to pull all this together into one place in a consistent format and to make it readable, which we frankly haven't had for quite a few years. So
I'd like to say thank you. I did some reading of it, and it was easy to understand and read.
You're welcome. Yes, I'll let Lily, you can take on parklands.
It was great, so we have this. Well, I don't know, we have Commissioner Ken McCroskey stopping by. I couldn't actually stay the whole time because I had to prepare this packet, and still we have some mistakes. So, but I think we had a great success. The owner of Valparaiso Cafe requested an event like this. What I don't want to actually, the business owners to think is that we're going to be putting these things whenever. What we want to have is actually create some desire to have a permanent one. Yeah. So with that, I think the next one would be at Valparaiso, but that would be it. And maybe some people on San Pablo Avenue also requested that. It's a little bit challenging. I contacted Caltrans. They said, we've never done anything on like that on San Pablo Avenue, but why don't you send us a drawing? Okay, I said, I'll do that. So,
Good answer.
So with that, unfortunately, I'm sorry I didn't bring pictures. Actually, I didn't take pictures of my own. The pictures I have are from somebody else, Francesco Papali, I think, and you sent me some?
Community services, probably.
Yeah, but I didn't have time to request pictures. So it was fun. Looking forward for the
Public Works did a great job of setting it up.
Mm-hmm.
And the Recreation Department, Mark.
And Michael,
Yeah. And the Recreation Department brought a lot of plants from Public Works, I guess maybe that was from Public Works, and stuff to sort of, flesh it out with furniture. And it was a beautiful day. People dropped by on and off all day, and a lot of people driving by were sort of checking it out.
So the last two items are just announcements of requests for proposals. One that has gone out, which is for a consultant to do the peer review of the final plans for the Marin Buchanan Phase 3. That's the work up on Marin and the utility undergrounding and closing the gap in the bike lanes. So we'll have someone come on that will review the plans that have been prepared by BKF just to make sure everything is good there, and they would also be providing construction management services for us because, as I mentioned with the CIP, we're feeling a little overwhelmed with the number of projects we're going to have under construction here pretty soon. And then Aleda was successful in getting final approval from the California Transportation Commission for funding for the design of the complete street pedestrian crossings. This is back from, remember the complete street study? There were crossings on San Pablo and we ended up on Taft and Buchanan. So we now have that money in the final approval for that money to hire consultants to do that design work. So we'll be going out with that RFP soon. And that will be a big design effort that you'll be a big part of in 2016. I think we have to have it finished by 2017, is it?
Yeah.
Probably get the funds by July 2017.
Yeah.
And that'll be about the right time to get it into the next CIP revision?
Yes, yes. We have a lot of projects in here that are unfunded. So if you go to the back, I'm not sure if this one ended up there as unfunded or not, but there are a number of them. So that we're not going to lose track of it. And we don't count something funded until we actually have the final
money in
written.
hand.
Yeah.
So this is just for construction plans, specifications and estimates.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you want us to go through these one by one, or you just kind of...
I think we can see them on the
Yeah.
document, so
Pretty straightforward.
unless there's anything
I think we
specific.
will be in touch with you about scheduling a meeting date, since, as usual, your meetings kind of get garbled by the Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays. So we'll pick a date someplace in between and have one combined November-December meeting.
I'm going to note that I'm not available October 22nd, which I think is our next meeting. No. Got to be at a different meeting.
We talked about adding an agenda item for writing a letter to the Union Pacific Railroad.
Yeah.
So maybe that's something you and I could draft.
Yeah, sure.
And bring to the next meeting.
Yeah, it's fine.
Let's do that.
I'll check my email. Yeah.
So this would be a letter about the fence issue at the, and Robert and I would draft that and hopefully bring it to the next meeting.
Okay, anything else anybody needs to add? And meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we close out Line 51? Maybe a Sean thing?
I think they are very aggressive.
Yeah, I think once the signals are all.
Oh, you should get great accolades. I
Looks
was
like Sean's
so
gonna
impressed. Like, I
delegate
didn't even know
somebody
they had
to
those. Well, I guess you
cover
would.
if one of the inspectors can't make it.
You never know.
It never
You
hurts
don't
to
know.
ask, right?
It never does.
You know, and this is the time to do it, when they want something.
It's so true.
We've got
And it
so many
sounds like they have
accelerated
it.
programs.
Like, yeah, I
I
can
think
throw it,
there's
you
no
know.
control,
What
but we
the
can
heck?
add in
Right
more.
on purpose for you.
Yeah. Brown, I don't care.
Not partial.
Yeah.
Correct.
Great job with Measure M. Let's do with this too.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty big news.
The Golden Gate Trail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's cool.
No, it's great. It's a doubling of their East Bay
Yeah, I mean-
service. That's pretty amazing. My
I'm
wife
looking
works
for
at
any-
Jennerfeld.
Oh, did,
I don't think she'd end up taking this particular bus,
Really?
but because of her schedule and all. But
I think it sounds fabulous.
all right, let's exchange that.
I'm going to try to finish
We get to do.
Yeah.
It'll be pretty simple.
But, you know, we've got statistics. We've got a consistent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's easier to walk through a break in the fence than to walk around.
Happening with your park, Penelope has been talking with the
On the record.
and,
By the way.
okay,
great. Cool.
It's
It's pretty cool that Golden Gate Transit is coming.
Yeah, you can go from Albany to Santa Fe.
Yeah.
I think they said they had a big Emeryville market.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Westcott has the same.
regulations actually changing.
Did it really?
I'm telling traffic, we should really have another one. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
We should go here, isn't it? I mean, it's really strong, according to the master.
Really?
A lot of people going to America.
The traffic is very amazing.
The traffic is awful.
I don't like the commute.
Yeah.
It's just horrible.
It's been, this year is awful, it's worse. I don't know what's going on this year.
Stronger jobs.
Well, there is
for
no
jobs
HOV
like
lane anymore. I mean, there is, but there's no advantage.
You know what I think?
So we just have to make it.
Transfer cost is so high. So if you get a job somewhere, you're not going to move.
That's right.
You can, Penelope's calling, you know, she's talking.
Okay,
so
buses.
Yeah.
It makes everybody's commute longer.
You hear that, you always hear those stories out of people commuting from like Central Valley, Stanford to work at.
The ACE train.
Right, it's huge.
What I didn't know also, you know what I didn't know? I was thinking, all of these air taxis, they're having a lot of business, like also. Because people like airplanes, it's more airplanes than one engine.
Yeah.
No, not for me either, but you know, but very good, right?
The market.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
That's what I make that clear.
That's, it is what it is.
It is.
Buses.
I know.
And Maryville.
Yeah, yeah. No, everything, all future growth and trans competitiveness points to Emeryville.
Yes.
So Berkeley's Emeryville, West County's Emeryville. Very growing.
Yeah, they finished with.
Isn't that where the transfer station used to be for the key system?
So I think